The first thing Kim Do-hyun noticed was the smell. Not burnt plastic, not ozone from sparking wiring. Ripe mango, rich and sweet. That's what the produce aisle smells like at 3 in the morning, when the refrigerators hum in the empty hall and the discounted melons start to ferment in their bins. He was lying face down in someone's school bag. His fingers felt for the keychain, a small teddy bear with a torn-off ear. Do-hyun opened his eyes and saw light, not electric, murky, greenish, as if someone had pulled the salad bag over the sun. Above him, a hole gaped in the ceiling of the cargo compartment. Through it poured this strange green sky. And in that sky, something was moving, something enormous. Do-hyun blinked. A shadow passed over the gap and blocked the light for 2 seconds. Then it returned. He heard a sound, a crunch, methodical, wet, as if someone were chewing on a plastic container of rice, but a container the size of a car door. Someone nearby coughed, 2 at once. Do-hyun turned his head and saw 2 girls in torn school uniforms. One was sitting with her back pressed against the bulkhead, her hand resting on her knee. Blood was trickling between her fingers. The other was lying on her side, staring at the ceiling with glassy eyes. Her mouth was slightly open, her lips were gray. The one sitting up looked at him. Her back was still straight, even now, even with blood on her hands. Han So-yeon, captain of the school archery team, the princess of Building 2. Do-hyun knew her, or rather he knew what she bought at the Homart checkout on Wednesdays. A Bingyo banana milk, 1. Samgak kimbap with tuna, 1. Samdasu water, a small bottle. Always the same thing, always exact change. So-yeon looked at him for a second, 2, 3. Then she uttered a single word. Who? Not a question, a statement. She had no idea who he was. 3 years at the register, every Wednesday, the same thing, and she didn't recognize him. Do-hyun opened his mouth and heard his own voice as if from the next room. Quiet, steady. The voice of a man accustomed to speaking in an empty store at 3 in the morning. Kim Do-hyun, 2nd year, 7th grade. The back desk by the window. So-yeon blinked. Nothing. A blank look. He might as well have recited the serial number from the barcode. The girl lying on the floor stirred. Choi Yuna, a TikToker, 1,200,000 followers, lead singer of the vocal club. Do-hyun knew her order too. Sugar-free yogurt. Konjac salad. Water with lemon. Always something light. Always everything for the camera. Yuna propped herself up on her elbow and looked at her hands. Her nails were broken, dirt under each one. Mascara had run down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She opened her mouth and closed it, opened it again. She couldn't. Do-hyun sat down. His head was buzzing. He touched his temple. Blood, not much, a scratch. He looked at the hole in the ceiling and saw it. A rhinoceros beetle, the size of a small car. Its dark brown chitin glistened in the green light like a wet trash bag. Its horn jutted forward and upward, as thick as an adult's fiery. The beetle sat on the ship's wing and chewed. The hull. Slowly, intently, with the kind of expression shoppers have when they're trying a free sample of sausage at a tasting and haven't decided yet whether they like it or not. Do-hyun stared at the beetle. The beetle chewed. The world made no sense. Then Do-hyun looked to his left and saw a refrigerator. White, an LG, the model with the freezer on top. There was one just like it in the back room of the Homart on Mafo. Exactly the same. The refrigerator was lying on its side in something soft and green. Moss, or maybe not moss. Something like moss, but with the smell of wet cinnamon. The door was closed, the gasket was intact, and the compressor was running. Do-hyun could hear that hum, quiet, steady, familiar, like 3 in the morning in an empty store when the whole world is asleep and you're sitting on a stool behind the register and the only sound is the refrigerator in the dairy section. He stood up. His legs held him steady. He walked over to the refrigerator. He crouched down. He ran his finger along the door gasket, a familiar motion. 3 years of night shifts. You check the gasket. If the rubber comes loose, the milk goes bad. Manager Lee yells. The gasket was fine. Do-hyun looked at the refrigerator. The refrigerator was humming. Somewhere behind him, a beetle was chewing on the ship's wing. 2 girls who had never noticed him were staring at his back. The green sky of an alien planet hung over them like a supermarket ceiling. Do-hyun said aloud in that same 3 a.m. voice, "Well, hello there, old man. Show me what you've got." So-hyun, standing behind him, exchanged a glance with Yuna. Yuna blinked for the first time in an hour. Do-hyun didn't turn around. He stared at the refrigerator and thought only one thing. The compressor is running.
That means it's cold inside. So if there's food in there, it hasn't gone bad.
3 years behind the register. That's the first thing you learn. Cold is life. He didn't open it, not now. First, he needed to figure out where they were, what had happened, and why the air was so thick that every breath felt like a sip of warm soup. Do-hyun straightened up and stepped outside through the opening. The green sky turned out to be even greener up close. No, not the sky. A dome of vegetation. Trees, if you could even call them trees. Trunks as thick as a high-rise building, purple bark. The leaves at the top merged into a solid canopy. Light passed through them and became like this. Green, thick, stifling the air. Do-hyun took a deeper breath. His head spun slightly. Not bad. On the contrary, too good. As if every breath were 2 breaths. It was plenty of oxygen, too much. He remembered a biology lesson, the only one he'd paid attention to because the teacher had mentioned that during the Carboniferous period, there was so much oxygen on Earth that dragonflies grew to the size of an eagle. Do-hyun looked at the rhinoceros beetle on the ship's wing, the size of a subcompact car. Plenty of oxygen. He looked down. There was no soil beneath his feet. Chitin, fragments of chitin, shells, small ones the size of a palm, like nutshells, only the nuts were fist-sized and had legs. Something crunched to his right. Do-hyun turned around. A creature crawled out from under the root of the nearest tree. Flat, wide, 8 legs, 2 claws in front, a tail curled upward like a scorpion. But its shell was reddish and wet, and it smelled like crab sticks that had been left on the counter overnight. A crab scorpion. Do-hyun didn't know why that word popped into his head, but it fit. The creature was the size of a large dog. It looked at Do-hyun. Do-hyun looked at it. The creature snapped its claws. Once, time. Then it turned around and went back under the tree root. Not aggressively, indifferently. Like a cat in a store that looked at a new stalker and decided he wasn't worth its attention. Do-hyun exhaled. His hands weren't shaking. He didn't understand why his hands weren't shaking. Maybe because 3 years of night shifts teach you one thing. When something strange happens, don't panic. Check the merchandise, check the refrigerators, check the register. Then panic. He went back to the storage room. So-hyun was still sitting against the wall. The blood on her knee had dried.
Yuna sat down. She wrapped her arms around herself. She was shaking. Do-hyun looked at them. Then he looked at the refrigerator. Then back at them. "We need water," he said in the same steady voice. "The acidity of the local water is unknown. We can't drink it until we check it. I'll take a look around. I'll find a spring. I'll be back." So-hyun looked at him, not like a classmate, like a person who says strange things in a strange place, but isn't screaming, crying, or shaking. She asked how he knew about the acidity. Do-hyun shrugged. "They sell aquarium test kits in Homart. Pet supply section, 3rd shelf from the bottom." He turned and walked toward the breach. So-yeon called out to him over his shoulder to wait. She tried to stand up. Her knee wouldn't hold her. She sat back down. Something flashed across her face, not pain, anger. At herself, at her knee, at the fact that she was the captain and the school's best marksman, yet now she couldn't even stand up. Do-hyun stopped. He turned around. He looked at her knee. Then he said she needed to clean the wound, that there should be a first aid kit in the ship's emergency kit, an orange box with a white cross. It's usually mounted on the bulkhead by the emergency exit. So-yeon asked how he knew that too. Do-hyun replied that before boarding the liner, he'd read the safety instructions, all of them, because his grandmother had told him to read whatever they gave him, so he did. Yuna let out a sound. Not a laugh, almost a laugh. The first living sound in the last hour. Do-hyun found the first aid kit right where he expected it to be. An orange box, a white cross. The clasp was bent, but the contents were intact. Bandages, antiseptic, painkillers, a tourniquet, a thermal blanket. He brought the box to So-yeon. She reached out to take it. He pulled it back. He said, "Hands first." He poured antiseptic onto her palms, then onto his own. Then he carefully washed the wound on her knee. So-yeon watched his hands, confident, calm. Hands that had spent 3 years stocking shelves. Quickly, precisely, without any unnecessary movements. She didn't flinch once. He applied the bandage, not perfectly, but tight. "It holds. Now for water." He stood up. Yuna said she wanted a drink. Her voice was dry, quiet, like a customer who's too shy to ask where the restroom is. Do-hyun nodded. He said he knew. He said it would be soon. He went outside and walked away from the ship. Chitin crunched under his feet.
Above his head, the wings of something invisible in the canopy hummed. A green light lay over everything like a film. After 200 meters, he found a stream. Water flowed over the rocks. The rocks were black. The water was clear, but had a slight yellowish tint. Do-hyun bent down. He sniffed it. Sour, like vinegar. Faint, but sour. You can't drink it. He looked around. Rocks, trees, chitinous dust, and silence. A peculiar silence. Not the absence of sounds, the presence of unfamiliar sounds. Clicks, rustles, creaks. This world was full of life, just not his kind of life. Do-hyun returned to the ship. In the cargo hold, he found a kettle from the emergency kit, a small one, 2 liters. He found some chemical heat packs, 4 of them. Each one burns for 20 minutes. He scooped up some water from the stream, put it on to boil. If the acid is weak, boiling won't remove it completely, but it'll kill the bacteria, or whatever's here instead of bacteria. While the water was heating up, he went back to the girls. So-yeon was sitting in that same position. Yuna was lying there with her eyes closed. She had an electric blanket over her. So-yeon had covered her with it. So-yeon placed her jacket under Yuna's head. She herself was sitting there in just a short-sleeved blouse. Her hands were covered in goosebumps. Do-hyun took off his jacket. He placed it next to So-yeon. She looked at him. He turned away before she could say no. The water came to a boil. Do-hyun let it cool until it was warm. He poured it into 3 containers from the first aid kit. He brought them over. Yuna drank in small sips. Her hands were shaking. Do-hyun held the container for her. So-yeon drank on her own in one long gulp. Then she drank from the second container. Then she looked at Do-hyun and asked what they were going to do. Do-hyun sat down on the floor, leaning his back against the refrigerator. The hum of the compressor ran down his spine, warm, familiar. He closed his eyes for a second, then he opened them. He said they had a first aid kit and 4 heating pads. There was a boiler. There was water nearby, but it was sour and had to be boiled every time. There was this compartment. The roof was partially intact. There was a refrigerator that for some reason works. And there's the night, which will soon fall. As for what happens at night, he doesn't know. So-yeon was silent for a moment. Then she said that outside she'd seen something big in the sky. Very big.
It was flying over the canopy. A shadow covered the entire opening. Do-hyun nodded. He'd seen the shadow too, so they couldn't go outside at night. He got up. He dragged a piece of bulkhead debris over to the breach. He couldn't seal it completely, but he could make the hole smaller. He worked in silence. His hands did what they always did: lay things out, sort them, and cover them up. 3 years of night shifts. Yuna watched him from under the thermal blanket. Her eyes were red. She said quietly, almost in a whisper, that she was scared. Do-hyun didn't turn around. He said he was scared too. Yunan fell silent. For some reason, those words made her feel better. Not because he said everything would be all right, but because he told the truth and kept working. It was getting dark fast. The green light turned dark green, then almost black. The sounds from outside were changing. The daytime clicks and rustles had died down. In their place came a hum, low, vibrating, as if hundreds of engines had started up simultaneously somewhere in the sky. Glider bugs. Do-hyun didn't know that word yet. He'd learn it tomorrow. Right now, he was sitting in the semi-darkness between 2 girls who didn't know him, on a planet he hadn't chosen, listening to something heavy falling in the forest with the characteristic crunch of breaking trees. It falls. Silence. It falls again. Closer. So-yeon didn't move. Her hand was on the handle of the emergency knife from the first aid kit. Yuna pressed her knees to her chest. Do-hyun sat with his back to the refrigerator. The compressor hummed. 7:03 p.m. ship time. He didn't know yet that this was important. He just noticed the numbers on the cracked screen of his bracelet. 7:03 p.m. The refrigerator behind him clicked quietly, like the sound a relay makes when the compressor switches modes. Do-hyun had heard that sound many times before, but this time, after the click, a scent followed. Laundry conditioner, sunflower oil, the scent of home art at 3 a.m, the smell of home. The smell lingered for 11 minutes. Do-hyun didn't know that at the time. He just sat there and breathed. Fabric softener, sunflower oil, the faint hint of floor cleaner, the smell of the night shift, the smell of a long, empty hall under fluorescent lights. Then the smell faded. A click. The compressor returned to its usual hum. Do-hyun sat in the dark. So-yeon and Yuna were asleep, or pretending to be. Outside, something heavy fell in the woods 300 meters away. The ground shook. Do-hyun didn't move. Morning arrived as a green light streaming through the cracks in the siding. Do-hyun opened his eyes, and the first thing he saw was So-yeon. She hadn't been sleeping. Maybe she hadn't slept all night. She was sitting against the wall with a knife in her hand, staring at the breach. Her face was ashen, dark circles under her eyes. He sat up. He looked at her. He said she should have woken him up. So-yeon replied that she'd managed on her own. There was something in her voice that he'd heard from customers who came to Home Art at 2 a.m. for a single bottle of water, a weariness that had long since ceased to be mere fatigue and had simply become a way of life. Yuna woke at the sound of their voices. She sat up. She looked at her hands. Yesterday she had been crying. Today her eyes were dry, empty. Do-hyun got up. He went outside. The morning air was cooler, 20 degrees. The green light was softer. The rhinoceros beetle was gone. Traces of its jaws remained on the ship's wing, deep gouges in the hull. Do-hyun looked around. The cargo compartment lay at the edge of a small clearing. Beyond it, the forest began. Purple trunks, a green canopy. Something was moving among the trees. Small, many of them. Chitinous legs tapped against the chitinous floor. He walked around the compartment. He found 2 more containers. One was open, empty. The second was dented, but still sealed. Inside were suitcases, school backpacks, 9 of them. He pulled them out one by one, opened each one, taking inventory. 3 years of night shifts. Take stock of what's there, write it down. First backpack, text focus, notebooks, pencil case, useless. Phone charger, useless. Bag of chips, useful. Set it aside. Second backpack, PE uniform, towel, small bottle of water, useful. Set it aside. Third, fourth, fifth. From the 9 backpacks he'd gathered, 3 500-milliliter bottles of water, 2 bags of chips, 1 chocolate bar, 1 apple, 2 towels, a pair of scissors, a roll of duct tape, a compact mirror, 3 pens, a notepad, 4 power banks, 2 of which worked, a clothesline that someone had used to tie a suitcase to a backpack about 5 meters long. Do-hyun laid everything out on a flat rock. He looked it over. 1.5 liters of water for 3 people. That's 1 day's worth if they conserve it. Food for 1 meal, maybe 1.5. After that, nothing. He looked at the refrigerator. It was lying on its side. It was humming. Do-hyun walked over. He crouched down. He placed his hand on the door. It was cold. He pulled. The door opened. Inside it was empty, clean, white plastic shelves. The light wasn't on, but it was cold. The compressor was running. An empty, working refrigerator on a foreign planet. Do-hyun closed the door. All right. He went back to the girls. So-hyun was already standing. She was leaning against the wall, but she was standing. Her knee was bandaged. It was holding up. He laid out everything he'd found. So-hyun looked at the spread. Do-hyun could see her doing the math in her head. The colonel's daughter, used to discipline. She understood right away. It wasn't enough. Yuna looked at it too, but there was no calculation in her eyes, only fear. A small bag of chips and a chocolate bar. That was all. Do-hyun said that in the morning he'd found a stream 200 meters away. The water was sour, but it was safe to drink if boiled. There was enough food for today. Tomorrow they'd have to go looking. So-hyun asked what they should look for. Do-hyun said a crab scorpion, that creature he'd seen yesterday. Red shell, claws, tail. It smelled like crab sticks. If it smells edible, maybe it is edible. Yuna let out a sound. This time it definitely wasn't laughter. So-hyun gave Do-hyun a long look. Then she asked who he was, not his name. She already knew his name. Who he was, what he did, why he was so calm. Do-hyun replied that he worked as a night shift clerk at the Home Mart supermarket in the Mafo district for 3 years. He lived with his grandmother. He's punctual, he's good with numbers. He doesn't panic because at 3 in the morning in an empty store, there's nothing to panic about. But the habit remains. So-hyun was silent for a moment. Then she said that this was the longest speech she'd heard from him in the 2 years they'd been at the same school. Do-hyun shrugged. In Home Art too, people usually keep quiet. The day was spent working. Do-hyun dragged the refrigerator into an upright position. It was heavy, 60 kilograms. He braced his feet against the moss and pulled. So-hyun tried to help. He told her to sit down. She didn't listen. She stood next to him. She braced herself with her shoulder. Together, they lifted it. The refrigerator stood upright. The humming grew quieter, satisfied, like a cat that's been scratched behind the ear. Do-hyun placed the refrigerator against the wall of the compartment, under the awning. Protection from the rain, if it ever rains here. Yuna sat in the corner all day. She didn't eat. He offered her some chips. She shook her head. He offered her a chocolate bar. She shook her head again. He offered her water. She took a single sip. Do-hyun didn't press the issue. He knew that look. In Home Art, people would sometimes come in, stare at a single spot, buy a single pack of ramen, and leave. Shock. The body shuts down hunger. It's dangerous if it goes on too long.
So-yun caught a scorpion crab. Do-yun didn't see how. He'd been fetching water from the stream. When he returned, she was sitting on a rock, holding the creature by the tail. The creature was snapping its claws in the air. So-yun looked at it with the expression of someone accustomed to shooting at targets rather than catching dinner with her bare hands. Do-yun took the creature. He turned it over. The underside of the shell was thinner. He took out his emergency knife. He cut it open. Inside was white meat. It smelled like crab, stronger than crab, sharper, but edible. He was almost certain. Almost. He cut off a small piece. He put it in his mouth. He chewed. So-yun and Yuna watched. The texture was like boiled squid. It tasted like crab if you soaked crab in vinegar. A little sour, but protein. He swallowed. He waited 10 minutes. His stomach didn't hurt. He wasn't dizzy. Everything was fine. He cut up the rest. He cut the meat into strips. He heated it on a stone over a chemical heater. No salt, nothing at all, just hot egg white. So-yun ate, silently, quickly. Yuna didn't eat. Do-yun didn't insist, but he left her portion nearby. He covered it with a leaf from some local plant, a wide leaf, thick, almost like plastic wrap. Evening, 6:50 p.m. ship time. Do-yun looked at his bracelet, the numbers on the cracked screen. He thought about the smell. Yesterday at 7:03 p.m., the refrigerator smelled like home art. A coincidence, a glitch, nostalgia. Or maybe not. 6:55 p.m. He was sitting by the refrigerator. So-yun was sharpening a knife on a stone, methodically. The sound was like in the knife-sharpening section at the market. Yuna was lying there with her eyes closed. Her portion of crab and scorpion remained untouched. 6:58 p.m. Do-yun placed his hand on the refrigerator door. It was cold. 7 p.m. A hum, the usual. 7:01 p.m., the usual. 7:02 p.m., the usual. 7:03 p.m., a click, a smell, fabric softener, sunflower oil, and something else. Fluorescent light. He saw it. A thin strip coming from under the refrigerator door. White light. Not green. White, like in a store. Do-yun stopped breathing, his hand on the door. He pulled. The door opened. Do-yun stared. So-yun looked up from the knife. Yuna opened her eyes. Inside the refrigerator wasn't a refrigerator. Inside was a shelf unit. Price tags, yellow, red, on sale. Rows of samdasu water bottles, cartons of milk, bingyo banana milk, yogurts. The light from a fluorescent bulb shone down from above. And the smell. Floor cleaner. That very one. The one Uncle Park from the night shift dilutes in a green bucket. Do-yun looked at the shelf. The shelf looked back at him. He knew this shelf. The third row, the dairy section, closer to the wall, where the refrigerator is 2 degrees colder, and that's why one bottle of banana milk always has an extended expiration date. He reached out. His fingers passed through the refrigerator's frame and touched a bottle of samdasu. Cold, wet with condensation. The real thing. Do-yun took the bottle, pulled it out, held it in his hand. He looked at the label. Samdasu, 500 milliliters, price 781. A yellow price tag, on sale. So-yun was standing behind him. He hadn't heard her approach. She was looking into the refrigerator. Her face. Do-yun had seen many expressions on customers' faces. Surprise, irritation, distraction. But he'd never seen one like this before. So-yun was looking into the refrigerator, and her face showed everything at once. Fear, hope, confusion, and something else. Something small and quiet. Like hunger. Only not in the stomach. Do-yun didn't try to explain. He couldn't explain it. He just started working. His hands moved on their own. 3 years of night shifts. He took items from the shelves, a bottle of water, another one, banana milk, a pack of japaguri, a package of samgak kimbap, 4 eggs from the tray sitting on the bottom shelf, Sampyo soy sauce, a small bottle, a piece of radish in vacuum-sealed packaging. He knew where everything was. He didn't look. His hands reached out on their own. The second shelf from the left, the third shelf from the bottom, the corner by the wall. He was grabbing items, quickly, precisely, like a night shift stalker unloading a delivery who knows that in 40 minutes everything has to be put out before opening. So-yeon stood nearby, silent. Yuna approached. She stood on the other side. She looked at the light.
The fluorescent light from the refrigerator fell on her face. White. Store light. Ordinary. Earthy. Yuna's lips trembled. 7:14 p.m. A click. The light went out. The smell vanished. The refrigerator became a refrigerator. On the shelves inside lay what Do-hyun had managed to grab. 2 bottles of water, 1 banana milk, a pack of japaguri, samgak kimbap, 4 eggs, soy sauce, radish. Everything was real. Everything was cold. Everything had price tags. Do-hyun closed the door. He sat down on the floor. His hands finally began to tremble. 11 minutes. He looked at his palms, then at the girls. So-yeon was looking at him. Yuna was looking at the bottle of banana milk in his hands. Do-hyun stood up. He went outside. He scooped up water from the stream, put it on to boil in a pot. He rinsed the eggs in the boiling water. He found a flat stone. He heated it over the coals from a chemical heater. His hands stopped trembling. They did what they could. In 7 minutes, he'd put together some samgak kimbap with egg and scorpion crab meat, triangular rice balls wrapped in seaweed, rice from a package, a hard-boiled egg, finely chopped scorpion crab, a drop of soy sauce. He ended up with 2 rice balls, warm, meat, small. He brought the first one to Yuna, a small one, so she wouldn't throw up. He set a banana milk next to it, cold. So-yeon had given it to him. He said it was from his grandmother. She says that when you're in shock, you crave something sweet and cold. Yuna took a ball. She took a bite. She chewed, slowly. Her eyes closed. She chewed, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Not from grief, not from fear. Rice, warm, with soy sauce. The taste of home. The taste of the supermarket checkout line. The taste of a normal life. Yuna ate and cried and couldn't stop. So-yeon received a second rice ball with a double egg. Do-hyun said she was anemic and needed it. So-yeon took it, took a bite, chewed it. She swallowed. She looked at him. She asked quietly how he knew what she liked. Do-hyun shrugged. He said he'd been watching what she bought at the checkout for 3 years. So-yeon fell silent for a long time. She finished the dumpling. Then she said one word. His name. Do-hyun. For the first time in 2 years at the same school, one of the two had pronounced his name correctly, with a soft inflection at the end, the way you'd say the name of someone close to you. Outside in the woods, something heavy fell onto the trees. The night gliders were beginning their descent. Do-hyun sat by the refrigerator. The compressor hummed. The remains of the first catch lay on the shelves. Tomorrow at 7:03 p.m., he'd go out again. He already knew that. He was making a list in his head, automatically, just like before a night shift. Rice. He needs rice, a big bag. Salt, vegetable oil, ramen, 2 packs, no, 3. Canned meat, if there is any. Bandage. He needs a bandage. And a Band-Aid. And maybe some vitamins. Yuna's lips are gray. Vitamin deficiency will set in a week, if not sooner. He was calculating in his head. 40 to 50 kilograms at a time. 11 minutes. That'll be enough, if he knows where everything is. And he did. On the 3rd day, Do-hyun made a mistake. The morning started off well. He woke up before everyone else. He went out to the stream. He drew some water. He put it on to boil. He washed the radish. He sliced it thinly. He put it in the remaining soy sauce. An improvised danmuji. Not the real thing, but it looked like it.
So-Yun woke up from the smell. For the first time in 3 days, there was something resembling surprise. Not fear, not tension. Surprise. She said it smelled like the school cafeteria. Do-Hyun replied that it was a dubious compliment, but he'd take it. Yuna ate. For the first time without tears. In small bites, slowly, but she was eating. Radish and leftover rice with soy sauce. She drank water, boiled, warm. Her complexion was slightly better than yesterday's. Her lips were still gray, but no longer ashen. Do-Hyun decided to scout the area. He walked for 3 hours. So-Yun wanted to go with him. He said that with her knee, 200 meters was the limit. She clenched her jaw. He saw her do it. The muscles in her cheekbones tensed. Anger, not at him, at her knee, at her weakness, at the fact that she was sitting there while someone else was doing what she should be doing. He said he needed her to stay with Yuna, that Yuna shouldn't be left alone. So-Yun looked at Yuna, looked at him, nodded. It wasn't an order. He gave her a reason, a specific one. She accepted it. In 3 hours, Do-Hyun had walked the perimeter within 400 meters of the compartment. He found a stream 200 meters to the north. He already knew about that one. He found a second water source 300 meters to the west. Not a stream, a puddle, stagnant, murky, no good. He found a clearing to the east, a large one, 50 meters in diameter. Light from above. The canopy parts, flat rocks, a good place to set up camp if they need to expand. He found shipwreck debris, a lot of it, scattered throughout the forest. Pieces of plating, pieces of furniture. One chair from the wardroom had grown into the roots of a tree. It looked like a sculpture, surreal. Found 3 dead crab scorpions, large ones, the size of a German shepherd, torn apart. Something bigger killed them. Their shells were split from the inside, not from the outside, from the inside, as if something had crawled out of them. Do-Hyun didn't dwell on it for long. He jotted it down in his notebook with a pencil. The coordinates were approximate, north by the moss, east by the light. Rough estimates, but better than nothing. He found another landing capsule, a small one, a single-seater, an emergency capsule. It was lying in a ravine 350 meters to the southeast, intact. The door was closed. He couldn't open it. It was jammed. He knocked. Silence. Inside was either empty or a dead body. He marked it on the map. He returned to the compartment. He told So-Yun. She listened carefully. She asked 3 questions, all to the point. About the distance to the capsule, about the crab scorpions that had been torn apart, about the size of the clearing. Do-Hyun answered them all. So-Yun said that the clearing was good, an open space. You can see what's approaching. It's easier to defend yourself. Do-Hyun nodded. The colonel's daughter, she thinks like a soldier. That's useful. The day went on. Yuna started talking. Not much, but more than yesterday. She asked if there was a signal. Do-Hyun showed her the bracelet. The screen was cracked. It showed the time. No signal. He hadn't found the ship's beacon. Maybe it was in another part of the wreckage. Maybe it had. Yuna nodded, quietly. Then she asked how many had survived. Do-Hyun said he didn't know. The wreckage was scattered over a large area. He'd seen parts of the ship, but hadn't seen any people. That didn't mean they weren't there. It meant they were far away, or hiding, or unable to get out. Yuna hugged her knees. Do-Hyun saw her knuckles turn white. He said he'd find them. Yuna looked at him. He didn't smile. He didn't promise that everything would be okay. He simply said he'd find them. And she believed him. Not because he looked like a hero, but because for 3 days in a row he'd done exactly what he said he would. Evening, 6:40 p.m. Do-Hyun sat by the refrigerator and made a list. Rice, 5 kilograms, ramen, 4 packs, salt, oil, Spam, 2 cans, water, 4 bottles. Bandages, Band-Aids, vitamins, if possible, and more, he thought. If the portal leads to Homart, If it's the third aisle in the dairy section, that means the second aisle is somewhere nearby. Canned goods. And the fourth aisle, beverages. And if he goes further, the household chemicals section, the camping gear section. Small, 2 shelves, but there are sleeping bags and flashlights and disposable lighters there. If he can make it in 11 minutes. Before that, Do-hyun had been mapping out his route, in the way, just like he did every night shift. Turn right at the dairy section, past the bakery. Turn at checkout lane 3, left into household chemicals, straight to camping gear, back through the canned goods section. The optimal route, he knew it with his eyes closed. 7:03 p.m., a click, light, a smell. The door. Do-hyun opened it. Homart, third aisle, dairy section. He stepped forward. His body passed through the opening of the refrigerator, and there he stood in the aisle. The floor was gray, linoleum. Under his feet, a wet spot from Uncle Park's mop. The lights hummed. 3:47 a.m. in Seoul. He stood in Homart on Mafo and breathed the air of home. 1 second. 2. Then he ran. Not a full outrun, a brisk stride. 3 years of night shifts had taught him not to run in the store. It's slippery, the merchandise will fall. Manager Lee will see it on the cameras. He walked quickly. A shopping cart. He grabbed one at the entrance to the aisle. A small one, a hand-pushed one. Rice, 5 kilograms, pea-pack, into the cart. Ramen, shin ramyun, 4 packs. No, he stopped, looked at the shelf. Next to it was nonoshim. More expensive, but the broth is fattier, more calories. On a planet where every calorie counts, fat content is more important than saving money. He took 2 packs of shin ramyun and 2 of nonoshim, a compromise. Next, salt, sunflower oil, a liter, heavy but necessary. Spam, 2 cans, heavy but protein. Water, 4 bottles, heavy but life. The cart was filling up. He was calculating the weight automatically. 5 kilos of rice, 2 kilograms of water, 1 kilogram of oil, 300 grams of spam each, 1 package of noodles, about 12 kilograms. There's a little to spare. He turned toward the campground. 2 shelves in the corner, sleeping bags, 3 of them. Thin, summer ones, but better than nothing. Into the cart. Flashlights, 2. Batteries, a pack. Lighters, 5 of them. A barbecue set, tongs, and a grill rack. It'll come in handy. The weight was increasing. 25. 30. He was counting. Time. How much time had passed? 5 minutes. 6. He still had time. He turned toward the display case and stopped. On the top shelf was a ham, a leg in a wooden frame. The price tag read 89,000 won, imported, Spanish. Do-hyun stared at the ham. A quick calculation ran through his head. Protein, lots of protein. Salted meat. It keeps for a long time, high in calories. Enough for 2 people for a week. His hand reached out. His fingers touched the frame, and he felt it. Not with words, with a sensation, as if someone had placed a hand on his shoulder. Heavy, warm. The hand of security guard Park Ajoshi, who came every night at 3 o'clock and brought Do-hyun a can of coffee. Who never asked where the guy got his bruises in April. Who once told him, "Take what you need." Need isn't the same as want. Do-hyun pulled his hand away. He stepped back. Hamon for 89,000 won. That's not a need. That's a want. He turned the cart around. He walked back, past the canned goods. He grabbed 3 cans of stewed meat, past the pharmacy shelf, a bandage, a Band-Aid, vitamin C tablets, a small pack, past the snacks. He stopped. Chocolate, 3 bars. Not the expensive kind, the regular kind, milk chocolate. Grandma used to say that after a shock, you need something sweet and cold. Time. 9 minutes. 10. He walked to the refrigerator, 3rd shelf, dairy section. The door was lit up. He loaded up the cart, hoisted it over the frame, quickly. Rice, water, noodles, oil, canned meat, flashlights, sleeping bags. 11 minutes. A click. The lights went out. He stood on this side, in the cargo hold. A green light, the smell of cinnamon and moss. Do-hyun sat down on the floor. Groceries lay scattered around him. Rice, water, noodles, oil, canned meat, Spam, 3 sleeping bags, 2 flashlights, batteries, lighters, vitamins, chocolate, a bandage, a Band-Aid, soy sauce. So-hyun stood 2 steps away. Her mouth was slightly open. Yuna stood next to So-hyun and held her hand. Do-hyun looked at them. He looked at the supplies. Then he said calmly, like a night shift receptionist at the end of his shift, "Delivery accepted. Everything's on the list. No misclassifications." So-hyun let out a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. Yuna squeezed her hand tighter. Do-hyun began to sort everything out. Inventory. Rice by itself, in a dry place. Canned goods by themselves. Water by itself. Medications by themselves. He placed the sleeping bags next to the girls. 3 of them. 1 for him, 1 for So-hyun, 1 for Yuna. So-hyun asked quietly what he was. Do-hyun placed the last can of stewed meat on the shelf. He straightened up. He replied that he was the night stock clerk. That was his job, receiving goods, stocking shelves, making sure everything was in its place. Only now the store was different. Night had fallen. Gliding beetles were falling in the forest. The ground trembled. Do-hyun lay in his sleeping bag, a thin one, a summer one, but warm. The refrigerator hummed nearby. So-hyun was breathing evenly for the first time in 3 nights. A sleeping bag, a fresh bandage on his knee, a full stomach. Do-hyun stared into the darkness and thought about the hamon. His hand reached out on its own. He almost took it. Almost. What would have happened? He didn't know, but he sensed it. Something would have broken. Not in the refrigerator. Inside him. In the deal. In the trust. Between him and what the fridge did for him. Take what you need. Need isn't the same as want. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow is the 4th day. Tomorrow he needs to look for others. Tomorrow he needs to cook rice for 3 and make a proper breakfast. Tomorrow he needs to figure out what's flying around here at night and how to protect himself from it. Tomorrow he needs to live. Do-hyun fell asleep to the hum of the compressor. The 4th day began with a revelation. Do-hyun woke up from the heat, not from his sleeping bag. The heat was coming from below, from the ground. He threw back the sleeping bag and sat up. He looked at the floor. Yesterday, he'd buried an empty Shin Ramyun package by the capsule wall. He'd just been cleaning up trash. He'd covered it with moss and tamped it down. Now there was a stone in that spot. It hadn't been a stone. It had become a stone. Flat, smooth, milky white, the size of a pillow, and warm. Do-hyun placed his palm on it. 18 degrees, maybe 20. Even warmth, constant, like the radiator in his grandmother's apartment in October. He sat there and looked at the stone. A Shin Ramyun package, buried in the soil of a foreign planet. It had become a warm stone. So-hyun woke up. She walked over, she touched the stone. She looked at Do-hyun. He shook his head. "I don't know." She crouched down, ran her finger over the surface. Smooth, like porcelain, white, opaque, warm. Yuna crawled out of the bag. She saw the rock. She walked over, sat down next to it, pressed her palms against it. Warm. She didn't move her hands. She sat there, basking in the warmth, in silence. Do-hyun looked at the stone and thought. A pack of noodles had become a source of heat. An earthly product, earthly packaging, synthetic plastic and dried wheat. They had taken root in foreign soil and become something else, something useful. This isn't a portal. It's something else. He didn't try to figure it out right now.
He jotted it down in his notebook. Buried Shin Ramyun. A warm rock. A connection. A question. Later. It's the 4th day now. He needs to look for people. Do-hyun made breakfast. Rice. He cooked it in a pot. A lot. Enough for the whole day. Spam with the rice, sliced thinly, seared on the rock. A drop of soy sauce. 3 bowls made from first aid kit containers. So-yeon ate quickly, like a soldier. Yuna ate slowly, but she finished it, the whole bowl. Her first full meal in 4 days. Do-hyun ate last, out of habit. At Homart, the night receptionist eats after everything has been sorted out. After breakfast, he said he was going out on a reconnaissance mission, far away, for the whole day. He needed to walk the entire perimeter of the wreckage, to find people, or traces of people. So-yeon said she would go with him. Do-hyun looked at her knee. So-yeon caught his gaze. She said her knee was holding up. She'd checked it that morning. It hurt, but it was bearable. Do-hyun looked into her eyes. She didn't look away. He nodded. Yuna stayed in the compartment. Do-hyun left her some water, food, a flashlight, a knife. He told her not to come out. He said they'd be back before dark. Yuna nodded. Her face was calm, not empty like before, but calm. She told them to be careful. Do-hyun and So-yeon went out. She walked with a limp, but quickly, determined. Every step on the chitin crumbs sounded crisp, like the click of a metronome. They walked in silence for the first 10 minutes. Do-hyun in front, So-yeon 2 steps behind. Then she spoke up. She asked about the refrigerator. Do-hyun said he didn't know how it worked. It opens at 7:03 p.m. It closes in 11 minutes. Inside is Homart, the real thing. You can take some, but not everything. So-yeon asked why not everything. Do-hyun told her about the hamon, about the sensation, about a hand on her shoulder. So-yeon was silent for a long time. Then she said it sounded like a rule, like a system. Someone had set the rules. Do-hyun nodded. Someone or something. They kept walking.
The forest was alive. Not hostile, but alive. Scorpion crabs rustled under the roots. Small beetles the size of a cat scurried along the trunks. Something large and slow moved through the treetops. A shadow glided across the ground. Do-hyun and So-yeon froze. They waited. The shadow passed. They kept walking. An hour later, they found a wreckage of the wardroom, a large one, half the room. The walls were crushed, the ceiling had collapsed. Inside were chairs, tables, a single screen on the wall, cracked. But Do-hyun stepped closer. A line of text scrolled across the screen, slowly, symbol by symbol. Green text on a black background. Beacon signal received. Nearest Federation patrol in the HL 4470 system. Estimated time of arrival, 6 standard months. Stand by. Do-hyun read it. He reread it. 6 months. So-yeon stood beside him. She was reading it too. Her expression didn't change, not a single muscle. 6 months. She said it in an even voice, like a fact, not like a sentence. Do-hyun nodded. 6 months. He looked at the screen. He looked at So-yeon. He said it changed everything. Anyone can hold out for 3 days. A week is tough, but doable. 6 months is different. It's not survival, it's life. You need a base, you need a system, you need people. So-yeon nodded. For the first time, they were on the same page. Not the kid in the back of the class and the princess from the second building. 2 people who understood the task at hand. They pressed on. 20 minutes later, they found tracks, human tracks, school shoes, several pairs, leading north, toward that large clearing Do-hyun had seen yesterday. They followed the tracks, The clearing opened up after a 10-minute walk, and there it was, a camp. Not their camp, another one, a large one, 20 or 25 people. The shipwreck debris had been piled into a heap, shelters made from the ship's plating, a campfire in the center, and people. School children in tattered uniforms, a few adults. Do-hyun spotted the physical education teacher. His leg was in a splint. He was lying on a makeshift stretcher. His face was ashen. Next to him was a woman in white, a nurse, Jung Hae-won. Do-hyun knew her. She used to buy cigarettes at Homart, slim ones, ladies' cigarettes. She was always shy. And then he saw him. Standing by the bonfire in the center of the camp was a young man, tall, straight back. His school uniform was torn but neatly tucked in. His sleeves were rolled up. He wore a watch on his wrist.
An expensive one, intact. Park Jun-ho, class president, the son of a lawmaker. He was speaking, loudly, confidently. His gestures were broad. People around him were listening. About 15 people sat in a semicircle. The rest stood at the edges. Do-hyun and So-yeon watched from behind a tree. So-yeon recognized Jun-ho first. Her expression changed, not fear, caution. Do-hyun caught snippets of the conversation. Jun-ho was talking about order, about rationing, about how water was limited and needed to be accounted for, about how, as class president, he was taking responsibility. It sounded right, logical, mature. Do-hyun listened and counted. 25 people, 1 campfire, 1 teacher on a stretcher, 1 nurse, flimsy shelters. He didn't see any water. So Jung-ho is controlling access. 1 source, 1 distributor. A classic setup. Manager Lee in Homart did the same thing, only he had the keys to the warehouse. Whoever controls the warehouse controls the store. Do-hyun tapped So-yeon on the shoulder. She turned around. He shook his head. Not now. They retreated, quietly. So-yeon limped faster on the way back. She was silent. Do-hyun was silent too. They were both thinking the same thing, but from different perspectives. So-yeon thought that Jung-ho was dangerous. Do-hyun thought that Jung-ho was rational. And that's worse. A dangerous person does foolish things. A rational person makes calculations. And Jung-ho's Jung-ho would lead to a simple conclusion. Anyone who isn't with him is a threat. They returned to the compartment before dark. Yuna was sitting by a warm rock, her hands resting on its surface. Her face was pensive. She said the rock had gotten bigger. Do-hyun looked. In the morning, it had been the size of a pillow. Now it was the size of a suitcase. The edges had spread out. The milky white surface was smooth, warm, a steady 18 degrees within a meter's radius. Do-hyun touched it. He wrote it down in his notebook. It's growing. The heat is stable. The radius is increasing. He told the girls about the main camp, about Jung-ho, about the lighthouse and the 6 months. So-yeon added details, the number of people, the layout, the teacher's condition. Yuna listened. Her expression changed. At the mention of 6 months, she turned pale. Then she clenched her fists. Do-hyun noticed. Not tears, fists. Something was changing inside her, slowly, but it was changing. Evening, 7:03 p.m. The portal. Do-hyun worked quickly, a different list.
Longer. He knew the route. The dairy section. Turn right. Past the bakery. Canned goods. Household cleaning supplies. Camping gear. Back. 10 minutes and 40 seconds. He returned with a full cart. More rice, more water, canned meat, a jar of honey, tea bags, soap, 2 towels, a clothesline, 10 meters, a roll of electrical tape, 3 pairs of socks, women's. He knew So-Yun's and Yoon's sizes from the shoes he'd seen in the compartment. So-Yun picked up the socks. She looked at them. She looked at Do-Hyun. He had already turned away. He was unpacking the canned meat. Yoona put on the socks, clean, dry, soft. An expression appeared on her face that Do-Hyun had seen on female shoppers when they found an item on the shelf that had long been out of stock. Quiet joy, small but genuine. Dinner, rice, canned meat, honey and tea, hot tea. 3 mugs from the containers. A warm stone warmed their feet. Do-Hyun sat and thought. 6 months, 500 grams of rice per person per day. That's the minimum. 1.5 kilograms for the 3 of them, 45 per month. In 6 months, 270 kilograms of rice alone. The portal provides 50 kilograms a day, but not just rice. Water, protein, vitamins, medicines, supplies, clothing. Enough for 3, enough for 5. It'll be tough for 10, impossible for 20. Unless they find other sources, scorpion crabs, protein, local, free, if they learn to catch them systematically. Water from the stream, sour, but boiled it's usable. If you build a proper fire pit, a warm stone. If you bury more food, if more grows, if the radius increases, you can heat an entire room. Do-Hyun wrote in his notebook. Numbers, calculations, diagrams. 3 years of night shifts, inventory, counting stock, order planning. Only now the scale is different. Not store shelves, people's lives. So-Yun sat down next to him. She glanced at the notebook. She was silent. She read. Then she said he needed a supply manager, someone who would keep track of things while he was out gathering supplies. Do-Hyun nodded. So-Yun said she could do it. Do-Hyun shook his head. He said she was needed for something else, for protection, for hunting. Her hands were weapons, not a pencil. So-Yun looked at him for a long time. Then she asked how he knew what she needed. Do-Hyun replied that he didn't know what she needed, but he knew what she was capable of, and that was more important. So-Yun looked away. She looked at the campfire. She was silent for a minute. Then she said quietly that no one had ever distinguished between those 2 things before, what she needed and what she was capable of. Everyone had always assumed they were one and the same. Do-Hyun didn't answer. He went back to his notebook. Yoona finished her tea. She walked over and sat down on the other side. She looked at the numbers. She said she had 1.2 million followers and didn't know how to do anything useful. Do-Hyun didn't look up from his notebook. He said she could sing. Yoona said singing was useless on a planet full of bugs. Do-Hyun said he wasn't so sure. That yesterday, when she was quietly humming before bed, the bugs behind the wall had fallen silent. Yoona blinked. She didn't remember humming. Do-Hyun remembered. He always noticed. On the 5th day, Do-Hyun figured out the rule. He had buried 2 cans of risham by the south wall of the compartment on the evening of the 4th day. In their place stood a block, milky white, solid, about the size of a microwave, built into the wall. The seam between the block and the metal cladding was perfect, as if they had grown together. Do-Hyun touched it, cool, not warm like the stone from Sinramyeon, cool and hard, like ceramic. He tapped it, a dull sound, just about 3 centimeters thick, sturdy. So-Yun stood nearby, watching, her arms crossed over her chest. She said the wall had gotten thicker in that spot. Do-Hyun nodded. Sinramyeon provided heat, Rishim provided the wall. Different products, different results. He took out his notebook. He wrote it down. Instant noodles, result. Heat-generating stone. Canned meat, result. Building block. Question: what will other items yield? He looked at the shelves of the makeshift storage room. Rice, oil, honey, tea, soy sauce. Every item had potential. Every package was either a building material, a tool, or something he couldn't even imagine. Do-hyun buried a tea bag at the entrance. One, a small one. We'll see tomorrow. So-hyun asked why he was burying food when there was already so little of it. Do-hyun replied that he was investing. So-hyun raised an eyebrow. He explained. One pack of shinramyeon costs 781 at Homart. A single warm stone that heats an area of 3 square meters is worth an infinite amount. It's not a waste, it's an exchange. So-hyun was silent. Then she nodded. Military logic. Use 1 bullet now so you don't have to use 10 tomorrow.
After breakfast, Do-hyun said he needed to go to the single-person capsule, the one he'd found yesterday. The door was jammed. There might be someone inside. So-hyun said she'd go with him. His knee was feeling better. She'd bandaged it that morning with a fresh bandage from yesterday's supply. Yuna said she'd stay behind. She wasn't afraid to be alone anymore. Or maybe she was afraid but didn't show it. That was progress too. They walked for 30 minutes. The capsule lay in a ravine, small, white, single-seater, an emergency capsule. These are automatically ejected when the main hull is destroyed. The door was warped. The hinges were jammed with dirt. Do-hyun took a pry bar from the toolkit he'd found yesterday among the wreckage. He inserted it into the gap. He pressed down. So-hyun helped, together. The metal creaked. The door shifted a hand's width. It was dark inside, a smell. Not of death. Sweat, old sweat, urine, and something sweet, familiar, an energy bar. Do-hyun shone his flashlight inside. Sitting in the pilot seat of the capsule was a person, small, thin, in a school uniform, head bowed, hands on her knees. A girl. Do-hyun called out quietly. The girl raised her head. Her eyes were red, her lips were chapped. She looked at the flashlight's beam as if it were the sun. She squinted. Do-hyun recognized her. No, he didn't recognize her. He recognized the uniform, a parallel class. But her face, he'd seen that face before. Where? At Homart. She'd come once a week to buy batteries, always batteries, different kinds, and soldering acid from the household goods section. Kang Haru, a quiet girl whom everyone thought was strange. Do-hyun held out his hand. Haru looked at his hand, at his face, at So-hyun behind him. Then she took it. Her palm was cold and dry. He pulled her out of the capsule. She was unsteady on her feet. Her legs had gone numb. 5 days in a chair. Do-hyun gave her some water. She drank greedily, half the bottle. He took it back. He said she shouldn't drink too much at once. Haru nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't ask who they were or where they were from. She just nodded. Then she turned back toward the capsule. She said she needed to grab something. She climbed back in. She pulled out her backpack. It was heavy. So-hyun asked what was inside. Haru opened it. Inside lay a servo motor, disassembled, neatly, every part in a separate bag, and a notebook with blueprints. Do-hyun looked at the blueprints. He didn't understand a single line, but he understood the precision, the same kind he used when he arranged merchandise on the shelves. Every jar facing the customer, every price tag perfectly straight. A perfectionism that makes no sense to others but makes sense to you. Haru looked at him, for the first time, straight into his eyes. She said the servo motor was from a ship's door, that you could build a generator out of it, a small one, but a working one, if there was a source of rotation. Do-hyun nodded. They walked back. Haru walked in silence. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't ask why. She just walked, looking around. When a crab scorpion scurried past, she didn't flinch. She looked at it with interest, as if it were a machine. The joints of its legs, the angles of its joints. So-hyun walked beside her. She watched Haru. There was something new on her face. Not wariness. Assessment. A military assessment. Fighter or not, useful or not. They returned to the compartment. Yuna was sitting by a rock. A mug of tea stood next to her. She saw Haru.
She looked at Do-hyun. He nodded. Yuna stood up. She walked over to Haru. She said her name was Choi Yuna. Haru looked at her. She said she knew. 1,200,000 followers. Yuna blinked. Haru added that she wasn't actually following her, but the algorithm showed it. Yuna didn't know what to say to that. Do-hyun prepared a meal for Haru. Rice, spam, an egg, a small portion. For a stomach that had eaten nothing but energy bars for 5 days, she couldn't eat much. Haru ate slowly, methodically, as if she were completing a task. She finished, set down the empty bowl, looked at Do-hyun, said thank you. One word, dry but genuine. Then she looked at the refrigerator for a long time. She walked over, went around it, crouched down, looked at the compressor in the back, at the wire that led to nowhere, not into an outlet, just into the ground. She said the wire wasn't connected to a power source, that the compressor was running without electricity, that it was impossible. Do-hyun said there were many impossible things here. Haru nodded. She took out a notebook. She began to draw a diagram of the refrigerator. So-hyun watched. Yuna watched. Do-hyun was preparing dinner, 4 servings now, 4 bowls, 4 sets of chopsticks carved from branches of a local tree. The purple wood provided good wood, dense yet light. The chopsticks turned out smooth. Rice, canned meat, honey for dessert, tea. 4 mugs. They ate around a warm stone. Haru sat next to Do-hyun, not across from him, not in the center, next to him. She didn't speak. She ate and looked at her notebook. She drew between sips of tea. Do-hyun didn't interrupt her. So-hyun sat on the other side. She was cleaning a knife. Yuna warmed her hands on her mug. Silence, but not empty, full. Like the silence in Hamart when all the refrigerators are humming and the lights are on and everything is in its place and you're just sitting on a stool knowing that the world outside the store's walls exists, but right now it doesn't concern you. 7:03 p.m. The portal. Do-hyun was working. Haru was watching. She saw the door open and inside was not a refrigerator but a passageway. Her expression didn't change. She took out her notebook and began to write. Opening time, closing time, passage parameters, width, height, air temperature at the boundary. Do-hyun was hauling in groceries. She was taking notes. They didn't get in each other's way. The 2 systems operated in parallel. One gathered supplies, the other studied. Do-hyun brought even more this time. 5 kilograms of rice, water, noodles, and something new. Onions, 2 heads, garlic, 1 head, sesame oil, a small bottle, gochujang, red pepper paste, a small jar. So-hyun saw the gochujang. Something flashed across her face. Do-hyun had seen that expression on customers who found a product from their childhood on the shelf. Nostalgia, physical, painful. Yuna saw the onions. She said she used to hate onions, that she always said on camera that she loved healthy food but hated onions. Now she was looking at the 2 heads of onions as if they were a treasure. Haru looked at her notes, then at Do-hyun. She said the portal had been active for 11 minutes, give or take 0, second for second. This wasn't a coincidence, it was protocol. Someone had programmed it. Do-hyun said he knew. Haru asked who. Do-hyun replied that he didn't know, not yet. Haru nodded. She jotted it down. Question, protocol, who's the author? On the 6th night, the tea bag sprouting by the entrance yielded a result. Small, glowing. A speck of light burned on the ground by the threshold of the compartment. Warm light, yellow, like a night light, like a luminescent lamp in Hamart. Small, about the size of a coin, but light, its own might in the darkness of a foreign planet. Do-hyun crouched down. He stared at the point of light. The tea provided light. The noodles provided warmth. The canned food provided a wall. Every item turned into something necessary, not by chance, necessary. As if the planet were reading not the item itself,
But the intention, why he had buried it. A tea bag at the entrance to see the path. Noodles by the wall to stay warm. Canned food in the wall for protection. The planet listened. Do-hyun stood up. 4 people, 5 days, a refrigerator, a portal, a warm stone. Building blocks, glowing dots. 6 months until rescue. 25 people at the Jung-ho camp, an unknown number of people in the forest. Beetles the size of a bus in the sky, crab scorpions underfoot. And him, the night watchman from Homart, with a refrigerator that opens once a day and the conscience of an old security guard instead of a lock. Do-hyun sat down with a notebook. He began to sketch, not a map, a plan. A plan for the base. Walls made of canned food blocks, heating from ramen, lighting from tea. Entrance, storage, kitchen, sleeping quarters. 4. No, more. 8, 10. People would come, he knew it. Not because he was an optimist, because he knew people. 3 years behind the cash register. People go where it's warm, where it smells like food, where someone is waiting. So-hyun sat down next to him. She looked at the plan. She said the entrance should be narrow, just wide enough for one person, easier to defend. Do-hyun nodded. He sketched it out. Haru sat down on the other side. She said that if they ran a wire from the refrigerator through the servo motor, they could get direct current. Small, but enough for a lantern. Do-hyun nodded. He sketched it out. Yuna was the last to approach. She looked at the blueprint, not at the walls, but at the empty space in the center. She asked what was there. Do-hyun looked. An empty space on the drawing. He hadn't planned anything. He'd just left the space open. He looked at Yuna. She was standing there, staring at the drawing with an expression he'd never seen before. Not fear, not sadness. Curiosity. Do-hyun said it was a square. Yuna looked up. He said that every city needs a square. A place where people just stand, just sit, just live. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Yuna looked at him. Then she smiled. For the first time in 5 days. A small smile, just the corner of her mouth, but a genuine one. Do-hyun went back to the drawing. 4 people gathered around a notebook. Light from the tea stall by the entrance. Warmth from the ramyun stone. A wall of cinder blocks behind them. The hum of the refrigerator. The city began with a plan. The plan began with a notebook. The notebook began with a boy who, for 3 years, had been stocking shelves and knew that every item had its place. On the 7th day, Sora arrived. Do-hyun woke up to a sound. Not bugs, not the crunch of chitin. Footsteps. Human. Quick, unsteady. Someone was running through the woods, stumbling, falling, getting up, running again. Do-hyun got up. So-hyun was already standing at the entrance, a knife in her hand, back straight, eyes fixed on the clearing between the trees. A girl tumbled out of the green twilight, small, thin. Her school uniform was in tatters slung over her shoulder. Her hair was dirty. Her face was wet with tears and sweat. Her lower lip was split, blood on her chin, fresh. Do-hyun recognized her. Park So-ra, the class president's younger sister, a sophomore. She used to come to Homart on Saturdays. She'd buy lined notebooks, always lined, never checkered, and a mechanical pencil, that very one, the red one, with an eraser on the end. Sora ran to the cubicle and fell, to her knees, into the moss. She was gasping for breath. So-hyun put the knife away. She crouched down beside her, didn't touch her, waited. Do-hyun brought water, warm, boiled. He set it down beside her. Sora was breathing. A minute, 2. Then she raised her head. She looked at So-hyun, at Do-hyun, at the compartment behind them, at the warm stone by the wall, at the refrigerator, at the 4 sleeping bags, at the shelves with food. Her eyes widened. She stared at the cans of stew as if they were a mirage. Do-hyun crouched down in front of her. He didn't say anything,
He waited. Sora swallowed. She wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand. She smeared it around. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, hoarse. She spoke slowly. Each word was like a stone. She said her brother had hit her. She wanted to bring some water to the boy from the parallel class. Lee Tae-sung. His arm is broken. He's lying under the awning. He's moaning. Haewon Nuna bandaged him, but he needs something to drink. Sora took a bottle from Jung-ho's stash. She carried it over. Jung-ho saw her. He stopped her. He said water was distributed according to the list. Lee Tae-sung is on the list, but his portion is for the evening, not the morning. Sora said he was moaning, that he wasn't feeling well. Jung-ho said that order is more important. Sora didn't listen. She kept walking. Jung-ho grabbed her by the arm. She broke free. He struck her with an open palm across the face. Her lips split against her teeth. People were standing around. No one said a word. Sora dropped the bottle. Water spilled onto the ground. Jung-ho said she'd squandered a shared resource, that this warranted a one-day ration cut. Sora looked up at her brother and didn't recognize him. Not physically. The same face, the same eyes, the same mouth with which 2 years ago he had sung her a lullaby when their parents had gone to a reception and left them alone. But something was missing from that face, something human. All that remained was arithmetic. Sora ran, not knowing where, just away from him, into the forest, through the trees, through the chitinous debris. She ran until she saw a light, yellow, small, a dot by the entrance. Go-hyun's tea lantern. She was silent when she finished. She stared at the ground, her hands on her knees, her fingers clenched. Do-hyun listened. He didn't interrupt. So-hyun stood behind him, and her breathing changed. It became harsher, sharper. Do-hyun knew that sound. That's how people breathe when they're barely holding back their rage. Yuna stood against the wall. She wrapped her arms around herself. Her face bore the same expression Do-hyun had seen on customers' faces when they found out the store had closed for good. Confusion. Haru sat in the corner and looked at Sora, silently. But the pencil in her fingers snapped in half. She didn't notice it. Do-hyun stood up. He walked over to the kitchen corner. He took out rice, oil, gochujang, sesame oil, onions. He began to cook. So-hyun approached. She said they needed to talk about Jung-ho, that he was dangerous, that if he found out where she had run away to, he would come. Do-hyun didn't stop. His hands sliced the onion, thinly, evenly, each ring the same thickness. He replied that he knew, that Jung-ho would come. Not today, tomorrow, or the day after, when he realized his sister hadn't returned. So-hyun said they needed to get ready. Do-hyun said he was getting things ready. So-hyun clenched her jaw. She said she wasn't talking about food. Do-hyun looked at her, calmly. He said he wasn't talking about food either. So-hyun was silent for a moment. He went back to the onions. He sautéed them on the stone in sesame oil. He added rice. He added gochujang. He stirred it. It turned out to be pokbampap. Simple, spicy, hot. He filled a bowl. He took it to Sora. She was sitting in the same spot. She didn't move. Do-hyun set the bowl in front of her. She wasn't looking at it. He sat down next to her. He was silent. For a minute. 2. Then he said it was rice with gochujang, that it wasn't very spicy, just medium. Sora looked up. Her eyes were red and wet. Do-hyun said that his grandmother always used to say that after crying, you should eat something spicy, because if your eyes are already wet, the spice won't make it any worse and it'll clear your nose. Sora stared at the bowl. The rice glistened with oil, red from the paste. Steam rose from it. She picked up her chopsticks. Her hands were shaking. The first bite. She chewed. She swallowed. Tears streamed down her face again, but these were different, not from pain, from the taste. spicy, hot, and oily, just like home. She ate and cried and ate. Do-hyun sat beside her. He didn't say a word, he just sat there. When the bowl was empty, Sora set it down on a rock. She wiped her face with her sleeve. She looked at Do-hyun. She asked if she could stay. Do-hyun said she'd need a sleeping bag, that he'd bring one that evening. Sora nodded, a small nod, like a child who'd been allowed to sleep over at a friend's house for the first time. Evening, 1903. The portal. Do-hyun was working. The 5th sleeping bag, the last one on the camping shelf. More rice, more water. And for the first time, he picked up a notebook from the office supply section, a lined one, and a mechanical pencil, red, with an eraser on the end. He knew that Sora kept notes. He could tell by looking at her hands. Her fingers were calloused from the pencil. Hands like that can't do without paper. When he came back and set the notebook down next to her sleeping bag, Sora looked at it. She picked it up. She ran her finger along the cover, opened it. Blank pages, a ruler. She pressed the notebook to her chest and went back to her corner. By morning, 3 pages of the notebook were filled, in small, neat handwriting. An inventory list of everything at the base, every can, every bag, every bottle, with the date received, with the approximate expiration date, with a note indicating who it was issued to. Do-hyun read it. He looked at Sora. She was standing nearby, small, quiet, her lower lip still swollen. But her eyes were different, not empty, focused. Do-hyun said she needed a title. Sora blinked. He said she was now the head of supplies, that without her he'd lose track of everything by the 3rd day. Sora clutched the notebook. Something appeared on her face, small, new, like that glowing spot by the entrance.
Dim, but real. Pride. Her own. The first in her life. Not for her brother, not for her family, for herself. On the 12th day, Do-hyun tamed his first beetle. It started by accident. He was carrying a box of groceries from the refrigerator to the storage room. Among other things, there was a can of Kempi soda in the box, carbonated, sweet, cheap, the kind school kids buy after class. The can was warm. It had heated up in the sun. Do-hyun set the box down and heard a sound, a rustle, quiet, like the rustling of a plastic bag. He turned around. Sitting on a rock 3 meters away from him was a creature about the size of a large dog. Its wings were folded behind its back, transparent, delicate, with a network of veins. Its body was elongated, 6 legs, 2 short front legs, 4 long hind legs, antennae as long as a forearm. The creature was looking at him, or rather at the can of Kempi soda. Its antennae were moving, fluttering, sniffing the air. Do-hyun froze. So-hyun was standing 10 meters away at the entrance, her hand on her knife. Do-hyun raised his palm, a signal, don't move. He slowly crouched down. He picked up the can. It was warm. He opened it. A quiet click, the hiss of gas. The creature on the rock flinched. Its wings lifted slightly. The rustling grew louder. Do-hyun set the can down on the ground. He took a step back, 2, 3. The creature was staring at the can, at Do-hyun, at the can. A second, 2. Then it hopped off the rock, light, almost weightless. It approached the can, lowered its head. Its antenna touched the rim. And it began to drink, quiet, quick gulps. Do-hyun watched. The creature drank the Kempi soda, and its wings trembled, slightly, frequently, making that same rustling sound, like the applause of a single spectator. So-hyun approached, quietly. She stood behind Do-hyun's shoulder. She whispered, "What kind of creature is that?" Do-hyun didn't know, but the way it drank, carefully, delicately, not greedily, not aggressively, it wasn't a predator, it was something else. The creature finished drinking. It raised its head, its antenna turned toward Do-hyun. It looked at him for 3 seconds, then it turned around, spread its wings,
a rustle, and it took flight. Its transparent wings blurred the air. The creature rose 2 meters, 3. It hovered. Then it flew toward the forest, slowly, as if it were in no hurry, as if it knew it would return. Do-yun looked at the empty can. He looked up at the sky. So-yun was standing nearby.
She said that this thing weighed 20 kilograms, maybe 25. Do-yun nodded. 25 kilograms, and it flies. Wings with a wingspan of 1.5 meters, powerful muscles at the base. The next day, the creature returned. Not alone, with 2 others, smaller ones. They landed on a rock and looked at Do-yun. Their antennae quivered. Do-yun took out another can of Kempi soda. He opened it. He set it down. All 3 hopped down. They drank in turn. They didn't push each other. They didn't fight. They waited their turn. Do-yun watched and thought about Hamert, about the customers who came every day at the same time. Regulars, predictable, loyal, if you know what they like. On the 3rd day, he set out 2 cans. The creatures drank. One of them didn't fly away after the soda. It stayed. It sat on a rock by the entrance and cleaned its antennae with its front legs. So Ra was the first to approach. She crouched down beside it. She held out her hand. She didn't touch it. She just held it out. The creature looked at her hand. Its antenna touched her finger, a light touch. So Ra froze. The creature ran its antenna across her palm. Then it withdrew it. It folded its wings. They just sat there. So Ra named it Pan-Pan. Do-yun didn't know why. So Ra said she'd had a hamster named Pan-Pan. It had died 2 years ago. This one looked similar. Do-yun looked at the creature. 6 legs, transparent wings, antennae as long as an arm. It didn't resemble a hamster in any way. But So Ra had decided, and that was more important than zoology. Haru studied Pan-Pan for 3 days. She sketched it in her notebook, its body structure, wingspan, and the joints of its legs. She determined that the creature belonged to the local winged arthropods, that its wings were similar to those of a dragonfly but scaled up, that the musculature of its thorax allowed it to carry twice its own weight, 25 kilograms of its own weight, 50 kilograms of load capacity. Do-yun listened. He looked at Pan-Pan. Pan-Pan was drinking Kempi soda. Do-yun asked Haru if it could carry objects, purposefully, from point A to point B. Haru said that theoretically, yes, if trained. She had seen studies on training wasps using food reinforcement. The principle is the same: stimulus, reward, repetition. Do-yun nodded. On the 5th day after they met, he conducted an experiment. He placed an open can of Kempi soda on a rock by the stream, 200 meters from the base. He tied a rope to the can and attached an empty container to the rope. Pan-Pan was sitting on a rock by the entrance. Do-yun showed him the can from a distance. Pan-Pan raised his whiskers, sensing something. He stood up, dashed toward the stream, sat down next to the can, and began to drink. Do-yun walked over. He carefully filled the container with water from the stream. He tied it to Pan-Pan's back with a soft cord made of clothesline. Pan-Pan finished drinking. He stood up. He flew back to the base, with the container of water, 2 liters, on his back, effortlessly. So-yun stood at the entrance and watched. Her mouth was slightly open. Do-yun took the container off Pan-Pan. He stroked his mustache. He gave Pan-Pan another sip of soda. Pan-Pan fluttered his wings, satisfied, like a cat that had been given a second piece of fish. Courier. Do-yun said it out loud. So-yun looked at him. He repeated it. Courier. Pan-Pan can carry water from the stream, 30 kilograms per trip, 3 trips a day, 90 liters, enough for 10 people. So-yun said it was madness. Do-yun replied that it was logistics. So-ra jotted it down in her notebook. Pan-Pan. Flutterwing. Species unknown. Load capacity, 30 kilograms. Payment, 1 can of Kempi soda per day. Staff position, courier. Haru called him SH-01. So-ra said his name was Pan-Pan. Haru said SH-01 was more accurate.
Sora said Pan Pan sounded warmer. They argued all evening. Du Yun cooked dinner and listened. 5 servings, rice, scorpion crab. So Yun had learned to catch them systematically, 3 a day. She'd cut off the tail with a single stroke of her knife and clean the shell. The meat was white and slightly sour, but by the 12th day, everyone had gotten used to it. Du Yun added soy sauce and sesame oil. It turned out almost like seafood from a street stall in Seoul. Yuna ate and said that if she posted this on her TikTok, it would get 1 million views. So Yun asked, "Which TikTok?" Yuna looked at her, then at the phone camera lying against the wall. The battery had died long ago, a black screen. Yuna said she runs her TikTok in her head, a still image. Her face is smudged and she's holding chopsticks, a scorpion crab on a hot stone. Caption: a new recipe from Chef Kim, medium spiciness, not recommended for those allergic to chitin. So Yun snorted. For the first time in 12 days, a real sound, alive. Du Yun looked at her. She looked away, quickly, but he noticed. The corner of her mouth. It twitched, upward. That night, he buried 4 empty Kempi soda cans around the perimeter of the base. 4 sides, north, south, west, east. In the morning, 4 poles stood in their places, thin, milky white, waist-high. And between them, a film hung in the air, almost invisible, transparent, like glass, but flexible. When Du Hyun touched it with his hand, the film gave way, warm, elastic. He pressed harder. It wouldn't give way. He walked around the perimeter. The film enclosed the base on all sides. 4 pillars, 4 walls. The top was open, but there were walls. So Yun approached. She pushed against the film with her shoulder. It wouldn't budge. She looked at Du Hyun. He said that Kempi soda created a barrier. So Yun said that changed everything. She was right. On the 20th day, Lee Min-ji arrived. She hadn't escaped. She wasn't injured. She came on her own, with a notebook, with 3 sharpened pencils, with questions. Du Hyun saw her in the morning. She was standing by the barrier, touching the film, methodically, with her right hand, then with her left, then with her elbow. She was taking notes. The film, transparent, elasticity approximately, contact temperature 21 degrees, source unknown. So Yun saw her second, her hand on the knife. Du Yun shook his head. She's not a threat. Min-ji looked up. She saw them. She adjusted her glasses. One arm was taped with electrical tape. She said her name was Lee Min-ji, sophomore, class 2, biology Olympiad, silver medalist at the national competition. She'd been observing this perimeter for 3 days from a distance of 50 meters. She needed to understand how the barrier worked, and she'd like to go inside if possible. Du Yun opened the barrier. He simply pushed the film apart with his hands. For him, it gave way. Min-ji entered. She looked around. A warm stone by the wall, building blocks, glowing dots, a refrigerator, pan on the stone, shelves with food. Du Yun saw how she was looking. Not like Sora, not like Yuna, not like Haru. Min-ji looked at it like a scientist examining a laboratory, cataloging, sorting, formulating hypotheses. She walked over to the warm stone. She crouched down. She took out her notebook. She made a note. Thermal object, milky white, surface temperature approximately 20 degrees, stable, presumably a low-intensity exothermic reaction, energy source unknown. She approached a building block, tapped it, made a note. She approached the refrigerator, walked around it, made a note. She approached Pan. He raised an antenna. She made a note. Do Yun stood there watching. 3 years at the register teach you to identify a customer's type at a glance. Min-ji was the type who comes in with a list. She knows exactly what she needs. She isn't distracted by sales. She doesn't take anything extra. She rarely asks questions, but when she does, they're to the point. She finished her rounds in 20 minutes. She walked over to Do Yun. She adjusted her glasses. She said she had 14 questions. Do-hyun said breakfast first. Minji blinked. She repeated it. Breakfast, as if the word were from another language. Do-hyun made her rice with spam and an egg. The 6th bowl, the 6th serving, the 6th person. Minji ate quickly, efficiently, like she was filling up a car. Fuel into the tank, let's go. She finished eating. She put down her chopsticks. First question. The portal in the fridge. How long has it been there? Do-hyun answered, since day 1, but consciously since the 2nd day, 11 minutes, 7:03 p.m., every day. Second question. Food transformation, a pattern. Do-hyun handed the notebook to Sora. Sora opened the notebook. She read aloud. Instant noodles, heat, canned meat, building material, tea, light, carbonated soda, protective barrier. Minji listened. She took notes. Her eyes burned. Do-hyun saw that fire, not fanaticism, hunger, intellectual hunger. She had spent 3 weeks at Jung-ho's camp, observing how 20 people survived by the rules of the strongest. And all that time she kept notes on the local fauna, about soil composition, about the behavior of beetles. But at Jung-ho's camp, no one needed her notes. No one needed her questions. Jung-ho once told her that theory is useless when hands-on work is needed. Minji clenched her notebook then and said nothing. The third question. She asked if Do-hyun had tried burying non-food items. Do-hyun shook his head, only food and packaging. Minji nodded. She said they needed to test it. What if it's not the product, but the intention that transforms? Then, theoretically, any object should work. But the type of transformation might depend on the chemical composition, or on the molecular structure, or on something else. We need an experiment. Khan controlled one. Do-hyun looked at her. Then he said she could use a separate area by the east wall for experiments. Minji looked at him. Something flashed across her face, quickly, almost imperceptibly. Surprise. Not at the offer, at the fact that someone had taken her idea seriously. He didn't say it was nonsense. He didn't say there wasn't time. He didn't say the theory was useless. He simply set aside the area. She nodded, dryly, businesslike. But her fingers relaxed their grip on the notebook. She'd been clutching it tightly for the entire 20 minutes. Now she let go. Over the course of 3 days, Minji conducted 12 experiments. She buried a bar of soap. Result, a small reservoir in the ground. Clean water, no acid, filtered. She buried electrical tape. Result, a thin thread in the soil, strong, elastic. You can pull on it like a wire. It conducts heat from a warm stone. She buried vitamin C tablets. Result, 3 small berries where she buried them. Red, edible, sour, like currants. Minji put together a table. She worked on it for 3 hours. Then she went to see Do-hyun. He was cooking dinner, 6 servings. She stood beside him. She said she'd discovered correlation. Food items yield utilitarian results tied to survival functions. Heat, walls, light, protection. Non-food items yield infrastructure-related results. Water filtration, wiring, new resources. She said the system wasn't random. It's technology. Someone designed this soil, or this planet, or both. Do-hyun didn't stop chopping onions. He said he knew. Minji hesitated. She asked how he knew. Do-hyun replied that he didn't know how. He just had it. The fridge doesn't open for just anyone. The earth doesn't grow just anything. Everything adapts to a need, to an intention, to a specific person. Minji said that wasn't scientific. Do-hyun said that scrambled eggs with spam aren't scientific either, but they work. Minji opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then she said that was the worst argument she'd ever heard in her life. But for some reason, she couldn't refute it. Do-hyun set a bowl in front of her. japaguri with black tunjang sauce, noodles in a thick, dark sauce, rich, hot, simple, a student's meal. He said her brain needed carbs, and that she could count this toward her statistics. Minji picked up her chopsticks. She ate. Hot noodles, black sauce, oily. Do-hyun watched her shoulders slump. The tension drained from her body. She ate, and her eyes closed for a second. Then they opened. She looked at him. She said that the correlation between the smell of onions and a decrease in cortisol levels was statistically significant. Do-hyun didn't know what cortisol was,
but he realized it was a compliment. Minji finished eating. She wiped her mouth. She took out a notebook. She started writing. Right there at the table, chopsticks stuck out of the empty bowl. Her pencil flew across the paper. Haru sat down next to her. She peeked into the notebook. They started talking, in a language that Do-hyun could only catch every other word of. Molecular structure, enthalpy, crystal lattice. Two minds worked in parallel. One analyzed, the other designed. Do-hyun washed the bowls, 6 of them, in boiling water with soap, real soap from Home Art, a small bar of laundry soap. His hands did their work, his head thought. 6 people, the 20th day, Pan-Pan and 2 more Russell wings. Show 2 and Show 3 according to Haru's classification, Mandugi 2 and Kimbok according to Sora's classification. The argument continued. The base was taking shape. Warm stones, building blocks, glowing dots, a barrier, a clean water tank, wiring made from electrical tape, small, but a city. It wasn't built from steel and concrete. It was made of noodles, soda, and tea bags, of things that cost less than 1,000 won in Home Art, of little things people buy without thinking. Here, every little thing became a foundation. On the 30th day, the physical education teacher died. Do-hyun found out about it from Hae-won. She came at night, alone, with the stretchers on which the teacher lay, dead. Ha-won dragged the stretcher 300 meters through the forest in the dark, past the night gliders, past the crunching chitin, past shadows the size of a bus. Do-hyun hadn't been sleeping. He was sitting by the refrigerator, tallying the supplies in his notebook. He heard footsteps. He went out. He saw Ha-won. Her face was pale. Her hands were covered in blood, not her own. Dark circles under her eyes. She looked at Do-hyun and said one word. Sepsis. Do-hyun opened the barrier. He helped drag the stretcher inside. The teacher lay motionless. His eyes were closed. His face was gray. His leg, in a splint, had swollen up, black, purple. The smell. Do-hyun knew that smell. At Home Art, when meat goes bad, they remove it from the display case and put it in a black bag. That smell. Hae-won sat down on the ground by the barrier. Her legs wouldn't hold her up. Do-hyun sat down next to her. He was silent. She spoke after a minute. Her voice was steady, professional, as if reciting a medical history. Open fracture of the tibia sustained in a crash. Reduction performed in the field. Splinting with improvised materials. Antibiotics from the emergency medical kit ran out on the 12th day. Infection. Suppuration. Sepsis. Multiple organ failure. Death at 22:47 ship time. She spoke, and her voice didn't tremble. Her hands were shaking. Her voice was gone. Do-hyun listened. When she fell silent, he stood up. He went to the kitchen. He took out some rice, powdered milk from yesterday's delivery, nuts, star anise, a pinch of cinnamon, sugar. He began to cook. Hae-won sat and stared into the darkness. So-hyun woke up. She came out. She saw the stretcher. She saw Hae-won. She understood. She didn't ask anything. She covered the teacher's body with a thermal blanket, silvery, covering him completely, including his head. She went back inside. Yuno woke up. Sora woke up. Minji woke up. Haru woke up. Everyone came out. Everyone saw. Everyone understood. Silence.
Du-Yun was cooking in silence. Something hot, something sweet, rice porridge, hot toy. Grandma used to make it in the winter, when it was cold, when Du-Yun was sick, when it was embarrassing to cry, but everything inside ached. Grandma would set the mug on the table and say nothing. She'd just set it down and leave, and he'd drink, and it would get warmer. Not from the drink, from the fact that someone knew he was feeling bad and didn't force him to talk about it. Du-Yun poured hot toy into a mug. He brought it to Hae-won. He set it down next to her, not into her hands, next to her, so she could decide for herself when to pick it up. She looked at the mug. Steam rose from it, the scent of cinnamon and sugar. She didn't pick it up. A minute, two. Then she did, with both hands, her fingers wrapped around the mug, white knuckles against the dark ceramic. She drank in small sips, hot, sweet, rice-flavored. Tears started flowing on the third sip, silently. She drank and cried and drank. Du-Yun sat beside her. He didn't say anything, didn't hug her, didn't comfort her. He just sat there. So-Yun stood 3 steps away, her hands clenched, her face stony, but her eyes were wet. Yuna cried quietly by the wall. Sura held her hand. Minji stood and looked at the stretcher. Her notebook hung in her hand, closed. For the first time ever, it was closed. Haru sat by the refrigerator and stroked Pan-Pan. Pan-Pan fluttered his wings, quietly, like a lullaby. Hae-won finished her drink. She set down her mug. She looked at Du-Yun.
She said he would grow up to be a very dangerous adult. Do-Hyun didn't understand. She explained, not with words, with her eyes. Dangerous because the people around him want to live. And when you want to live, you start to fear losing that. And that fear is stronger than any gliding beetle. In the morning, they buried the teacher. Do-Hyun dug a hole, a deep one, 1.20 meters. So-Yun helped, Haru helped, Minji helped. Yuna and Sura stood nearby. Hae-won stood upright, hands at her sides, her face dry. She'd cried herself out during the night. They laid the body down, wrapped in a thermal blanket. They covered it with earth. Do-Yun placed a stone on top. Peace Lab. Haru carved into it with a knife. A name, a date. Physical education teacher at Sogyang High School. Do-Yun stood there, wondering what to place on the grave. Something from the garden, something that would grow. He didn't know, but he felt he had to. He took out a tea bag. He placed it on the stone. The next morning, a small flame was burning on the grave, a tiny one, yellow, like a candle. It didn't go out in the wind. Hae-won saw it. She stood there for a long time. Then she turned to Do-Yun. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. After the teacher's death, Hae-won stayed. She could no longer go back to Jung-ho. Not because he wouldn't let her, because she could no longer look at him. She explained that Jung-ho had forbidden her from using the last of the antibiotics on the teacher. He said the antibiotics were needed for those who could work. A teacher with a broken leg couldn't work. So it was irrational to waste antibiotics on him. Hae-won took the antibiotics from the stockpile without permission. Jung-ho found out. He didn't hit her. Worse than that. He said in front of everyone that Nurse Jong puts her personal attachments above the common good, that it was irresponsible, that next time she would only treat patients according to his list. Hae-won looked him in the eye and walked away. Now she was sitting by the campfire at Mapo 2 base. That's what Do-Yun had started calling their camp. He didn't come up with it. It was Sora. She'd written it on the cover of her notebook, Mapo 2, inventory book. Do-Yun liked it. Mapo, a district in Seoul, where home art is, where his grandmother is, where home is. And now here, too. Hae-won became the 7th person, a medic, the only adult, 24 years old, 6 years older than everyone else. She smelled of dried herbs. She smoked hand-rolled cigarettes made from local leaves wrapped in a Shin Ramyun label. Ironic, warm, tired.
She called Do-hyun by his last name, Kim Do-hyun, in full, like a doctor calls a patient, or like an older sister calls her younger brother when he does something that's both foolish and incredibly important. On the 32nd day, 3 more people arrived at the base. School children from the forest, hungry, dirty, and frightened. They saw the light. The tea stalls glowed in the darkness like lighthouses. They came into the light. Do-hyun met them at the barrier, fed them rice, spam, warm tea, put them to bed. In the morning, Sora wrote them down in her notebook. 10 people, Mafo 2. On the 60th day, Jung-ho came for his people. Not alone. He sent 5 men, at night, armed with sharpened pieces of metal instead of weapons. Do-hyun hadn't slept. He knew this would happen. Sora kept track not only of supplies, but also of rumors. 3 of the 10 people at the base had previously been at Jung-ho's camp. They told stories. Jung-ho was losing people. In 2 months, 6 had gone over to Mafo 2. 4 had gone into the woods and never returned. 1 had joined Hae-won when she left. Jung-ho had 14 men left, and co-pilot Song Gi-tae, who had broken his arm in the crash but set it himself and was now walking with a splint. Gi-tae was an adult, 29, a former soldier. He didn't take orders from Jung-ho. He observed, he assessed, he waited. But right now, none of that mattered. 5 guys came at night, through the woods. They hadn't expected the barrier. The first one bumped into the plastic sheeting and bounced back. He fell, he cursed. The rest froze. They stood on the other side of the barrier and looked at the base. The light from the tea stands illuminated their faces. Do-hyun stepped out, alone. He stood on his side of the barrier, a meter away from them, the plastic sheeting between them. He recognized 2 of them, customers from Homart. One had been buying energy drinks, the other had been buying chips and beer. Their faces looked angry. No, not angry, hungry, and angry from hunger. Do-hyun asked why they had come. The leader of the 5, tall, broad-shouldered, Kim Tae-han, defensive back on the school rugby team. He said the class president demanded that unaccounted-for resources be returned to the common fund, that 20 people were starving while 10 were living it up, that it was unfair,
that they would take half the supplies and leave. Do-hyun listened. Tae-han spoke. He repeated Jung-ho's words, almost verbatim. Do-hyun heard the student council president's intonation in his voice. Copied. Memorized. Tae-han isn't a leader. He's an executor. A hand, not a head. Do-hyun said there were no reserves. Tae-han didn't understand. Do-hyun repeated himself. There are no reserves to take. Food arrives once a day, just enough for the day. There will be more tomorrow, but there's nothing to take and carry away. That's true. He stopped stockpiling by the 3rd week, so Ra kept track. Consumption equals intake. Reserves are minimal, enough for 1 day. Tae-han watched. He didn't believe it. Do-hyun said they could go in, look around, check it out, but without weapons. Tae-han remained silent. He looked at the debris in his men's hands, at the barrier, at Do-hyun, at the light behind him, at the warm rock, at Pan-Pan's body sleeping on the rock by the entrance. Behind Do-hyun stood So-yeon and Haru. So-yeon with a bow. Not a school, a homemade one, made from a piece of antenna and a cable. 3 arrows, tips made of crab-scorpion chitin, shaped, sharp. So-yeon held the bow calmly, as one would hold a familiar tool, not a weapon, a tool. Tae-han looked at the bow, at the arrows, at So-yeon's face. He knew who she was. Everyone knew. The princess of the 2nd Corps, the team captain. So-yeon looked at him expressionlessly, without anger, without a threat. She just looked, and that was more terrifying than any scream. Taehan lowered his blade. The others did too. Do-hyun said they didn't need to fight, that they didn't need to starve either, that if any of them wanted to leave Jung-ho, they could come. Not with weapons, with empty hands, and they would be accepted. Taehan remained silent. Then he turned around. He left. The four followed him into the darkness, into the forest, through the crunch of chitin and the rustle of nocturnal wings. Do-hyun stood by the barrier and watched them go. So-yeon approached. She stood beside him, her bow lowered. She didn't say he'd taken a risk. She didn't say he was a fool. She didn't say he should shoot next time. She said that two of them would come tomorrow. Do-hyun looked at her. She knew guys like that. They weren't driven by anger. They were driven by hunger. Anger passes. Hunger doesn't. She was right. The next day, two came. Not Taehan, two younger ones, unarmed, empty-handed, hungry. Do-hyun fed them. Sora wrote it down in her notebook. 12 people. 3 days later, another one came. 13. A week later, 2 more. 15. Jung-ho's camp was melting away. Not because Do-hyun was fighting, because it smelled like food there, because the light was on, because it was warm. People were drawn to the light and the smell, just as they always had been. 3 years behind the cash register, Do-hyun knew. You don't need to call people. You just need to open the doors and turn on the light. They'll come on their own. The walls of Mapo-2 were growing, building blocks made from tin cans. Min-ji calculated the optimal layout. 2 rows of blocks, the gap filled with soil, a wall half a meter thick, sturdy, warm, milky white. Haru connected a servo motor to the refrigerator, a small generator, direct current, enough for 3 lanterns, dim but steady. Not tea light style lamps, real lanterns, electric ones. Yuna found her role by chance. She sang, quietly in the evenings, by the campfire, just for herself, and the rustle-winged insects would flock in. Pan-pan, show 2, show 3, and new ones, lots of them, 20, 30. They would settle around her and listen. Their antennae quivered, their wings rustled in time with the rhythm. Yuna sang, and the swarm circled around her like a strange, living concert hall. Min-ji watched. She recorded voice frequencies, the insects' reactions, exposure time. She determined that certain pitches attracted the rustle-winged insects, others scared off small predators, still others calmed the crab scorpions. Yuna's voice was an instrument, not for TikTok, for survival. Yuna learned this from Min-ji. She looked at her hands, the very same hands that had been trembling from shock just 3 weeks ago. Then she looked at Pan-pan, who was sitting at her feet, rustling. Then at Do-hyun. He was preparing dinner, 15 servings now, a large pot, kalguksu, noodles in broth, scorpion crab instead of seafood, onions, garlic, soy sauce, 15 bowls, each one slightly different. Yuna's without onions, Min-ji's was hotter, Haewon's wasn't spicy, Sora's was medium, So-yeon's had double broth. Haru's was just a large portion, the rest were standard, but each bowl had a name on it. Yuna watched as he handed them out. How he remembered, how he knew. Except for Hyun. She said it quietly. He turned around. She said she used to think people only saw her on screen, that without a camera she was invisible, that 1.2 million people loved her, but not a single one truly did. And he had seen her for 3 years, without a camera, without a filter, without subscribers. He simply saw what she was taking at the register. She fell silent. Du-Yun stood with a ladle in his hand. Steam rose from the pot. Pan-Pan rustled at Yuna's feet. 15 people were eating around the campfire. The walls of Mafo 2 glowed in the darkness. The tea stalls shone like a constellation. And somewhere in the forest, 300 meters away, in a camp that was getting smaller and smaller, Park Jun-ho gazed at that light and counted. Du-Yun knew this. He wasn't afraid. Not because he was brave, because he was busy. 15 servings a day, 15 names, 15 bowls, each one's own. Fear could wait. Dinner wouldn't. On the 99th day, Mafo 2 became a city. Not a metaphor, a city. 22 people, 4 streets. A street was the name given to the path between the living capsules, 1.5 meters wide. But the paths were lit. Lanterns made from Desanjo soda bottles buried along the path cast a soft, yellow light. The bottles had transformed into glowing posts about knee-high, not bright, but enough to see where you were stepping. At night, Mafo 2 looked like a small village in the mountains. Warm walls, yellow lights, steam from the kitchen, the smell of food. So Ra kept track of the residents. 22. 3 groups had come out of the forest over the past month. The same thing every time. Hungry, dirty, frightened. Every time Du-Hyun met them at the barrier. He fed them, he gave them a sleeping bag. In the morning, So-Ra wrote their names in a notebook. Min-ji assigned them a task. Not right away, a day later, once the person had rested, once they'd eaten, once they'd stopped flinching at every sound. Then Min-ji would approach with a notepad and ask what the person could do. Any skill would do. One guy knew how to weave baskets. He became a basket weaver. He wove containers for carrying water from local vines. One girl could draw. She became a cartographer. She drew a map of the surrounding area on the wall of the main module, accurate and detailed, with markings showing where crab scorpions were found and where russell-winged insects nested. So-Yun commanded the hunt. 3 hunting pairs, each worked its own sector. Crab scorpions in the morning, leave the russell wings alone, bypass the rhinoceros beetles, avoid the night gliders. The rules were simple. Break one and there might not be a second chance. So-Yun didn't yell. She didn't give orders. She spoke calmly. Once. Everyone listened. Not because they were afraid. Because she was the first to get up in the morning and the last to go to bed. Because she had a scar on her shoulder from the claw of a crab scorpion she'd killed with her bare hands during the 3rd week when it crawled into the capsule where the others were sleeping. Because she ate last, after everyone else. Just like Du-Hyun. They hadn't agreed on it. They just both knew it was the right thing to do. Haru built, every day, walls made of blocks, roofs made of the chitinous shells of crab scorpions, huge ones. So-Yun brought them back from hunting. Haru smoothed the edges, fitted them together. Chitin is durable, waterproof, lightweight, the perfect roofing material. Under a chitin roof and walls made of canned food blocks, a module took shape. 2 by 3 meters, for 2 people. Warm, dry. 10 modules, 15 sleeping places, plus a kitchen, plus a storage room, plus Haewon's medical station, plus Min-ji's lab. In the center was a clearing, the very one Yuna had seen on the blueprint on the 5th day. An empty space, a circle of flat stones, the campfire in the middle. In the evening, everyone sat here. They ate, they talked, they were silent. They watched the fire. Du-Hyun cooked every evening, 22 servings, a large pot made from a metal crate from the ship. Haru had modified it. She welded on the legs, she sanded down the inside. The pot held 30 liters, koguksu for 22 people, or ramen, or rice porridge with scorpion crab, or pokbampap with gochujang. The menu changed every day.
Do-hyun memorized what everyone liked. Sora's notebook helped. She wrote down not only the supplies, but also everyone's preferences. Kwon-jian is allergic to sesame seeds. Park Min-soo is lactose intolerant. Jung-eun-bi has a sensitive stomach. Do-hyun read the notes every morning, just as he used to read the merchandising plan at Homart. Every shelf, every price tag, every customer. The scale was different. The principle was the same. On the 93rd day, Yuna held her first concert. Not for TikTok, for the city. She stood in the center of the square. 21 people sat around her. A swarm of rustle-winged insects circled above them. 38 of them, according to Sora's count. Yuna sang, softly, slowly, a song everyone knew, a school song. The one they sang at the September 1st assembly, a simple one, about how morning would come and everything would start over. The rustle-winged insects circled. Their wings caught the light from the tea stalls and scattered glints, like a disco ball in the school auditorium. One of the younger kids started to cry, quietly, not out of sadness, because for a second it seemed that everything was fine, that they were just at a school party, that the bus was waiting outside the door, that tomorrow they'd be going home. So-yeon sat against the wall. Her knee had finally healed. The scar remained, deep, white against her tanned skin. She looked at Yuna, and in her eyes was something Do-hyun hadn't seen before. Not jealousy, not rivalry. Recognition. So-yeon had been strong her whole life, with a bow, with a knife, with a command. Yuna was strong with her voice. They were different kinds of strength, and both were necessary. So-yeon realized this here, on a foreign planet, in a city of noodles and soda. She realized it and let go of something inside, something old, something heavy. That story about the guy and the song that had stood between them for 2 years. Do-hyun noticed. He always noticed. After the concert, when everyone had left, he brought So-yeon a bowl, samgyetang, chicken soup, made from chicken brought from Homart. A small package, a single serving, with ginseng, with garlic, with rice inside, hot, fragrant. He set the bowl down next to her, silently, just like Grandma used to set down hot tea, without a word. He just set it down and left. So-yeon looked at the bowl. Steam rose from it, the scent of ginseng, the scent of care. She ate slowly, not like a soldier, slowly, every mouthful, every piece of chicken. Do-hyun didn't see her. He was already washing the pot, 22 bowls, hot boiled water, soap. So-yeon finished eating. She set down the bowl, hands on her knees. She sat alone in the square of the empty city and gazed at the sky, the green sky of a foreign planet. And for the first time in 93 days, she didn't feel like she had to be strong. She just sat there. She just breathed. She just was. On the 120th day, Do-hyun went to see his mother, not alone, with So-yeon. Min-ji insisted it was madness. Haru said that mathematically the chances of survival were 30%. Hae-won said she couldn't give him a blood transfusion if his arm were torn off. Sora silently put 4 bandages and 2 cans of stew in his backpack. Yuna didn't say anything. She just sang all night before leaving, quietly, by his module. The rustle-winged beetles were circling. She was singing for him. Not a concert, a prayer. The reaper beetle's nest was 4 kilometers to the southwest. Min-ji had calculated it based on the wind direction and the scent. The reaper beetles were the largest creatures they had ever encountered, the size of a bus, 6 legs, jaws capable of biting through the trunk of a purple tree. Their exoskeleton was black, thick, impervious to anything Mafo-2 had. They appeared in the 2nd month. They would come to the city limits, stand there, wiggle their antennae, sniff, then leave. Min-ji determined that they were attracted by a scent, the scent of earthly food, rice, oil, soy sauce. For the reaper beetles, these were unfamiliar pheromones, strong, alluring. So far, they'd only been coming to sniff, But Minji warned that this was a reconnaissance mission. The worker beetles report to the queen. The queen makes the decision. If she decides the source of the scent is prey, she'll send a swarm, 20 workers, 30. The barrier won't hold. The walls won't hold. Nothing will hold. Du-hyun listened. He nodded. He thought. Then he said they needed to go to the queen. Minji asked why. Du-hyun replied that they needed to negotiate. Minji said you can't negotiate with insects. Du-hyun said nobody negotiates with customers either. But if you know what a person wants, you can make sure everyone ends up satisfied. Minji opened her mouth, closed it, jotted something down in her notebook. Du-hyun and So-hyun set out at dawn. Du-hyun's backpack was heavy yellow. Inside were 20 kilograms of sugar, their entire supply, 4 5-kilogram bags. He'd been setting them aside from the last 3 shipments. So-ra knew. She'd noted them down as a strategic reserve, purpose, negotiations. They walked for 4 hours. The forest changed. The trees were thicker, darker. The purple trunks were almost black. The canopy was denser, almost no light penetrated. The smell was different, not cinnamon and moss. Sour, sharp, like formic acid. Reaper beetles, their territory. So-hyun walked with her bow at the ready. 3 arrows, useless against the reaper's chitin. But habit, discipline, readiness. They spotted a nest and stopped. A mound 15 meters high, 20 in diameter, built of chewed wood and chitin. Dark brown, damp, warm. Workers were moving around the hill, dozens of them, black, the size of a bus. They were hauling pieces of wood, stacking them, chewing them up, building. The smell was unbearable, sour, heavy.
Do-hyun was breathing through his mouth. So-hyun wasn't breathing at all, or so it seemed. They stood at the edge of the clearing. The workers noticed them. One raised his head, their antennae turned toward them. Then a second, a third, 10 heads, 20 antennae, all pointed at them. Du-hyun took a step forward. So-hyun grabbed his arm. He turned around, looked at her. She didn't say, "Don't go." She said, "Go." "But I'm right here." He nodded. They walked, together, across the clearing, past the workers. The reapers watched. They didn't attack. They sniffed. Their antennae twitched. They could smell the sugar. Du-hyun reached the entrance to the mound, a dark hole, 2 meters in diameter, damp walls, warm air. A sound came from inside, low, vibrating. A pulse, a beating. He went in. So-hyun followed him. The tunnel led downward, walls of chewed pulp, smooth, warm. Light filtered through thin sections, yellow, murky. They walked for 3 minutes. The tunnel widened, and they saw the queen. She filled the entire chamber, 20 meters long. Its body was whitish, soft, segmented. Its head was small. Its antennae were as long as a human. Its eyes were small, shiny, black. She was looking at them. Du-hyun looked back at her. At Homart, there were regular customers, grandmothers, who came every day. He knew them by name. He knew exactly what to serve them. The queen wasn't a grandmother, but the principle was the same. She was the mistress. This was her territory. He'd come to her with a gift, with respect. He took off his backpack, opened it, took out a bag of sugar, 5 kilograms, opened it, poured a mound onto the floor of the cage, white sugar on dark pulp. Matka raised an antenna, touched the mound, froze. A second, 2. Then she began to eat, slowly, carefully. Her tiny mouth parts worked. The sugar disappeared. Du-hyun poured out the second bag. The queen ate. The third. She ate. The fourth. 20 kilograms. All of it. The queen raised her head. She looked at Du-hyun. Her antennae touched his face, gently, like his mother's fingers. He didn't back away. He stood there, breathing. The queen withdrew her antennae. She made a sound, a vibration, a low one. The walls of the chamber trembled.
So-Hyun tensed up, her hand on the bow. Do-Hyun shook his head. It wasn't a threat, it was a response. He didn't know how he knew that, but he knew. The queen needs sugar, constantly, regularly, just as a regular customer needs her morning cup of coffee. Give her that, and she won't touch the city.
She won't harm people. She won't send a swarm. Business, an exchange, sugar for safety. Do-Hyun bowed, briefly, the way you bow to a regular customer. He turned around. He walked toward the exit. So-Hyun walked beside him, silently. When they stepped out into the light, she looked at him. She said he'd just been negotiating with a creature the size of a house, as if she were a customer at a grocery store. Do-Hyun shrugged. He said the principle was the same. Find out what's needed, give it, don't be stingy, get something in return. So-Hyun looked at him. Then she did something she'd never done before. She laughed. She didn't snort, she didn't smirk. She laughed, openly, loudly. Standing in the clearing in front of the harvester beetle's nest, Do-Hyun looked at her and thought that sound was worth 20 kilograms of sugar. On the 150th day, Song Gi-tae arrived, the co-pilot, 29 years old, a former soldier, a broken arm that he'd set himself, a splint made from a fragment of a ship's frame. He arrived in the afternoon, openly, alone, unarmed. He stood by the barrier and waited. Do-Hyun came out. Gi-tae looked at him, calmly, appraisingly. The gaze of a man accustomed to assessing others in a matter of seconds. Do-Hyun knew that look. Manager Lee used to look at new employees that way, determining who would stay and who would leave in a week. Gi-tae said he had come as an envoy from Jung-ho, that Jung-ho was proposing a merger, 2 camps into one, under joint leadership. Do-Hyun listened. Gi-tae spoke, the terms. Jung-ho would remain head of the council. Do-Hyun would be in charge of supplies. Resources would be shared. Decisions would be made jointly. It sounded reasonable on paper. Do-Hyun asked how many people Jung-ho had left. Gi-tae paused. Then he said, 9. 9 out of 25. The rest left, to Mafo 2, into the forest. They just left. Do-Hyun nodded. He asked why Jung-ho wanted to merge. Gi-tae didn't answer. He was looking at the city behind Do-Hyun. Walls, roofs, lights, smoke from the kitchens, rustling wings in the sky. 22 people, a system, order, life. Do-Hyun saw Gi-tae's expression change. Not surprise, understanding. Gi-tae was a soldier. He knew what a functioning base looked like, what a command structure looks like, what leadership that isn't based on fear looks like. Do-Hyun invited him in. Gi-tae entered. Do-Hyun showed him around the city. He didn't brag. He didn't show off. He just walked and talked. Here's the kitchen. Here's the warehouse. Here's the medical station. Here's the lab. Here are the living quarters. Gi-tae walked and looked around. He stopped at the refrigerator for a long time. Then he turned to Do-Hyun. He asked what it was. Do-Hyun said it was a refrigerator. Gi-tae shook his head. He said he wasn't asking about the brand or model. He was asking why the refrigerator worked without electricity, why it smelled like food from Earth, and why was a 17-year-old boy standing there so calmly, as if all of this were perfectly normal. Do-Hyun remained silent. Gi-tae watched. Then he said quietly that he'd seen things like this before, in the army, at remote outposts. Anomalies, artifacts, objects that defy all laws of physics. He said that federal intelligence collects such objects, catalogs them, classifies them. If the Federation sees this refrigerator, they'll take it. And they'll take the boy who's using it, too. To a lab, for research, forever. Do-Hyun listened. His expression didn't change, but inside, something tightened. Not fear, understanding. Gi-tae wasn't threatening him. Gi-tae was warning him. Do-hyun asked why he was saying this. Ki-tae replied that for 5 months he'd watched the boy, the lawmaker's son, play at being a dictator. And for 5 months he'd watched the boy from the supermarket build a city. And he'd chosen a side. Not Jung-ho, not the Federation. This one. Do-hyun remained silent. Ki-tae said he'd return to Jung-ho's camp. He'd say that the negotiations are ongoing, that they need time. That would buy a week, maybe 2. Then either Jung-ho would come himself or do something foolish. Do-hyun nodded. Ki-tae left. Do-hyun stood by the barrier and watched him go. So-yeon approached. She had heard everything. She'd been standing behind the module's wall, a bow in her hand, just in case. She said Ki-tae was right, that the Federation would take the refrigerator. Do-hyun nodded. He said he knew. So-yeon asked what he was going to do. Do-hyun looked at the refrigerator. It was humming, quietly. Calm. Familiar. Do-hyun said he didn't know yet, but that there were still 30 days until the Federation arrived, and that a lot could happen in 30 days. That evening, he stood by the refrigerator. 7:03 p.m. The portal opened. Home art. Fluorescent light. The smell of detergent. Do-hyun stepped inside. He walked along his usual route. Dairy products, canned goods, camping gear. But he stopped. Not at the shelf, at the window. The large glass pane of the sales floor. Beyond it, mofo at night. Streetlights, the asphalt wet from the rain. A pharmacy sign. The tteokbokki stand on the corner. Closed, 3 a.m, no one around. Do-hyun stood by the window and looked out at Seoul, at his neighborhood, at his world. For the first time in 5 months. He looked and realized he didn't want to go back. Not now, not like this. He wants to return, but not alone, not as a fugitive, not as a crash survivor. He wants to return with the city behind him, with people who trust him, with a story his grandmother would tell the neighbors. My Do-hyun, he opened a supermarket there. He fed the whole city. He stepped away from the window, went back to the shelves, picked out some groceries, sugar for the womb, rice, water, and something else, a small picture frame, plastic, cheap, from the stationery section. He didn't know why. His hand just reached for it. He returned through the portal, closed the door, placed the frame on the shelf. Empty, without a photo. In the morning, the frame was still there. It hadn't transformed. It hadn't become part of the shelf. It was just standing there, an empty frame. Do-hyun looked at it and understood. Not everything transforms, only what's necessary for survival. A picture frame isn't necessary for survival. A frame is necessary for life. That's different. He placed the frame on the shelf in his module, empty. Later, someday, there would be a photo. On the 171st day, Jung-ho came by himself, alone, unarmed, without an entourage, without speeches. He stood by the barrier and looked like a man who'd been stripped of his uniform and forgotten to be put back in it. A school uniform, dirty, torn, untucked. For the first time, his sleeves weren't rolled up. A watch on his wrist, an expensive one. The glass was cracked. It had been like that for 2 months. His face was gaunt, his cheekbones were sharp, dark circles under his eyes. He stood there and waited. Do-hyun came out. They looked at each other, not like enemies, like 2 people who had lived 300 meters apart for 5 months and chosen different answers to the same question: how to survive. Jung-ho said his camp had fallen apart. The last 5 left yesterday. Ki-tae left 3 days ago. He's alone. He said this in an even voice, without anger, without self-pity. A fact, like a line on a beacon's screen. Wait. Do-hyun asked what he wanted.
Junho was silent.
For a long time. Then he said he wanted to eat. Simply. No conditions, no negotiations, no loyalty lists. Just to eat. Do-hyun opened the barrier. Jung-ho entered. He walked through the city, past the walls, past the modules, past the kitchen, past the square. People watched. Those who had left him, those he'd beaten, those he had denied water. They watched and remained silent. Jung-ho walked without looking up. Sora stood at the entrance to her module, a notebook in her hand, a pencil behind her ear. She looked at her brother. He saw her. He stopped. They stood 5 steps apart, brother and sister. He'd hit her in the face 5 months ago, split her lip, over a bottle of water. Sora looked at him. He looked at her face. The lip had healed. The scar remained, small, white, in the corner of her mouth. It would be there forever. Jung-ho looked at the scar. His hands hung at his sides, empty. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He couldn't. Sora turned and went into the module. A minute later, she came out with a bowl. Rice, canned meat, soy sauce. Warm, simple. She set the bowl on the rock in front of her brother, not in his hands, on the rock, just as Do-hyun used to set the hot dog in front of Hae-won, so he could decide for himself when to take it. Junho stared at the bowl. Steam rose, the smell of rice, the smell of home, the smell of what he had taken from people and distributed according to lists. Now they were giving it to him just like that. No list, no conditions. His sister, whom he had hit. Jung-ho sat down on the ground. He picked up the bowl. He ate, slowly. The chopsticks trembled in his fingers. Rice fell back into the bowl. He picked it up, ate, picked it up. No tears fell. He wasn't crying, but his hands shook so violently that the chopsticks tapped against the rim of the bowl. Do-hyun stood 10 steps away. He watched. So-yeon stood nearby. Her bowl was slung behind her back. She asked quietly, "What now?" Do-hyun said, "Now it's 23. Sora wrote it down in her notebook. Park Junho, position not assigned. The next day, Kitai brought in the last 5, the ones who had left Junho's camp. 28, plus 3 from the forest whom Kitai found along the way. 31. Sora filled 2 pages. The town was growing. Do-hyun was cooking. 31 servings. The pot wasn't big enough. Haru had made a second one from a piece of a ship's fuel tank. Do-hyun stood between the 2 pots, a ladle in each hand, serving them out. Names, preferences, allergies. 31 people. He remembered each one. Gitae stood nearby, watching. Then he said quietly that he understood now. Do-hyun asked what? Gitae said he understood why the refrigerator opened for him. Not because he was special, because he remembered. Do-hyun didn't answer. He ladled out the soup, serving it. For Uni, no onions. Minji's was hotter. Hae-won's was mild. Jung-ho got his usual portion, standard, nothing special, because Do-hyun didn't know what he liked. Not yet, anyway. He'll find out. The following week, Do-hyun buried the last item. Not food, not packaging. An apron. His work apron from Homart. Blue, with the logo, with a soy sauce stain on the right sleeve. He brought it through the portal on the 175th day. Just took it off the hook in the back room. His own, personalized, Kim Do-hyun, night shift. He buried it in the center of the square. In the morning, there was a pole standing in that spot, 2 meters tall, milky white, smooth, warm. A light was glowing at its top. Not a small one, a big one, bright, like a lantern. The light fell on the square, yellow, warm, even, like a fluorescent lamp in Homart at 3 in the morning. Minji approached. She touched the pole. She made a note. Then she raised her head.
She looked at the light. She looked at Do-hyun. She said that intention determines the outcome. He buried not an apron. He buried himself, his place, his name, his role. And the earth responded with a pole, a streetlight, a center. Do-hyun looked at the pole, at the light, at the square he had sketched on the 5th day. An empty space on paper, now an illuminated space in the city. Yuna approached. She stood beside him. She said quietly that it was beautiful. Do-hyun said it was just a streetlight. Yuna shook her head. She said no, it wasn't a streetlight. It was a lighthouse, for those still in the forest, for those who haven't arrived yet, for those who will come later, in a year, in 10 years. She was right. On the 181st day, rescue arrived. The morning began as usual. Do-hyun got up at 5. He lit a fire. He put water on to boil, rice in the pot, 34 servings. 3 more had arrived over the past week. All 47 passengers of the Hanbyul 7 were now at Mafo 2, all alive, except for the gym teacher. His candle on the grave burned every night, a warm yellow light. It never went out.
Do-hyun stood by the pot and listened to the morning sounds of the city, the rustle of Pan-Pan's wings. He was always the first of the beetles to wake up. He would perch on a rock by the kitchen. He would wait. Do-hyun would give him a sip of Kempi soda, a ritual, a habit. Morning coffee for the beetle. The creak of the door to Haru's module. She was the second to come out. She nodded silently. She sat down beside him. She watched the fire. Do-hyun shared with her some Twidgem potatoes from yesterday's freezer, in silence. She ate in silence. They sat side by side and said nothing, and that meant more than any conversation. Yuna's voice. She was humming in her module, softly, a morning vocal exercise. The rustle-winged insects behind the barrier raised their antennae, tuning up. In an hour, they would be circling over the city. 38 couriers, carrying water, hauling cargo, patrolling the perimeter. Yuna was their conductor. Soyeon's footsteps, quick, precise. She stepped out of the module, already prepared, hair tied back, a knife on her belt, a bow on her back. She walked the perimeter every morning, 20 minutes, then she returned. She reported to Do-hyun, not because he ordered her to, because that's just how it turned out. She was his eyes. He was her home. The rustle of a pencil. Sora. She sat at the entrance to the warehouse and wrote. The notebook was filled to the last page, a second notebook, a third. The Mapo 2 inventory log spanned 3 volumes. Every can, every package, every person, every day. A tap on the table. Minji. She wasn't tapping, she was counting. Her fingers on the wood. 1, 2, 3. Formulas in her head. She wrote them down. Her catalog of transformations filled a separate notebook. 47 experiments, 47 results, a system, a pattern. Science. The smell of a hand-rolled cigarette. How one. She was smoking by the wall of the infirmary, dried local herbs in a shin ramyun wrapper. She exhaled smoke into the green sky, an ironic smile, her first smile of the day. She smiled more often now, not because it had gotten easier, because it had become possible. Gitae's voice. He was teaching 4 guys how to take apart and put together debris, skills, discipline. Gitae wasn't giving orders. He demonstrated, he explained, he waited. He had found his place, not a pilot, not a soldier, a mentor. Jung-ho's silence. He sat in the square, alone, every morning. He looked at the lighthouse. He was silent. Sora brought him breakfast, every day, in silence. He ate, in silence. They didn't talk. Not yet. But Sora brought it to him, every day. That was the beginning. Do-hyun stood by the cauldron and listened to it all. Morning in the city, his city. Not because he had conquered it, because he had cooked it. Bowl by bowl, serving by serving, name by name.
180 days, 5,400 servings. He hadn't counted. Sora had counted. She told him yesterday. 5,400. Do-hyun nodded. A large shipment. The sound came at 10:14. Not a bug, not the wind. A hum, high-pitched, distant, mechanical. Everyone looked up. Do-hyun looked up. So-hyun climbed onto the wall. She looked up at the sky, a green canopy, a hazy light. And through it, a dot. White, bright, moving, growing. A shuttle. So-hyun screamed, for the first time in 6 months. Not a scream of fear, a scream that couldn't be described in a single word. Everything at once. People ran out of the modules. They looked up. Some fell to their knees. Some hugged the neighbors. Some stood and watched in silence. Yuna stopped singing. The rustle-winged creatures hovered in the air, motionless. 38 pairs of wings froze. Then the swarm rose, higher, toward the canopy, toward the light, toward the shuttle, toward it, like an honor guard. The shuttle was descending. Do-hyun could see it now, white, with the Federation's blue stripe. The landing gear was extended. The engines were roaring. The canopy of trees parted in the wind. Green leaves rained down like confetti. The shuttle hovered over the clearing 200 meters from the city. The pilot, a lieutenant, came on the line. A voice came over the emergency beacon, clear, steady, federal. Rescue vessel Kason 14, calling survivors of Hanbyul Flight 7. Confirm your location. Gite approached the beacon. He responded, a military voice, calm, professional. Coordinates, number of survivors. 34, -1, condition satisfactory. A pause, a long one. The pilot, a lieutenant, looked out the window. Then his voice changed. His professional composure cracked. He asked what was down there. Gite looked at Do-hyun. Do-hyun nodded. Gite replied that it was a city. Pause, a longer one. The pilot asked him to repeat it. Gite repeated it. A city. Mafo 2. 34 residents, infrastructure, walls, roofs, lighting, water supply, medical station, kitchens, courier service using local flying insects,
And a refrigerator. Pause. The pilot said he needed to descend for visual confirmation. The shuttle descended. The engines fell silent. The hatch opened. The pilot, a lieutenant, stepped out. Young, Federation uniform, spotless, ironed. He stood on the gangway and looked out. Down in the valley lay the city. Milky white walls, chitin roofs, yellow lights along the paths, a lighthouse pillar in the square, steam rising from the 2 pots in the kitchen, rustle wings in the sky, lanterns tied to their backs, tiny points of light circling over the city like a constellation that had decided to descend a little lower. 3 people came out to meet the shuttle. So-hyun, a bow on her back straight, a scar on her knee. Yuna. She was walking and singing, quietly, not for the shuttle, for the rustle wings, so they wouldn't get nervous, so they wouldn't fly away, so they'd know everything was all right. And Do-hyun, in a clean apron, blue, with the Homart logo, with the soy sauce stain on the right sleeve. He'd washed it that morning, dried it on a warm stone, put it on. Not for looks, because it was his uniform, his shift, his job. The pilot, lieutenant, watched them from the gangway. Do-hyun approached, stopped 3 steps away, looked at the lieutenant, bowed slightly, the way you bow to a customer who's walked into a store, briefly, politely, out of habit. Good evening. You must be tired from the trip. Dinner's just ready. Come on in. I'll pour you a drink. The lieutenant looked at him, at his apron, at the soy sauce stain, at the city behind him, at the beetles in the sky, at the girl who was singing, at the girl with the bow. He was silent for 15 seconds. Then he walked down the gangway. He stood in front of Do-hyun. He saluted. Do-hyun didn't know what to do. He wasn't in the military. He was a night receptionist. He did the only thing he knew how to do. He turned around and led the lieutenant to the kitchen. The lieutenant followed behind him.
Behind the lieutenant came the crew, 4 people in Federation uniforms. They walked along the path past the modules, past the walls, past the people who stood and watched. 34 people, alive, all of them, except for one. Dinner was waiting for them in the square. A pot, kalguksu, hot, with scorpion crab, with onions, with garlic, with soy sauce. 34 bowls, plus 5 for the crew. Do-hyun had added them in advance. He knew they'd be coming today. Not because he could predict the future, because today, at 7:03 p.m., the portal opened to somewhere other than Homart, for the first time.
Do-hyun opened the door and didn't see a shelf with milk. He saw a kitchen. Grandma's kitchen. Dark. Nighttime. The smell of leftover soup. A note on the table. Grandma's tiny handwriting. Grandson, soup in the pot. Eat. I'm proud of you. Do-hyun stood there looking at the note. Then he picked up the pot. Heavy. Full. Grandma's sundubu jjigae. Spicy. Thick. With tofu, with egg, with pepper. He brought it, set it on the stove, heated it up. The shuttle crew got to eat Grandma's food. The lieutenant ate, silently, finished, set down the bowl. He looked at Do-hyun, asked what he was going to do next. Do-hyun was standing by the pot, a ladle in his hand, a stain on his apron. Behind him, the city he'd built out of noodles, soda, and canned stew. All around him, the people he'd fed for 180 days. Next to him, the refrigerator, that very one, white. LG. The compressor hummed, quietly, steadily, contentedly. 7:03 p.m. The door smelled of fabric softener. Do-hyun looked at the lieutenant, then at So-yeon. She was standing by the wall, her bow behind her back, her arms crossed. A slight smile. The first one of the day. For him. For Yoon. She was sitting by the campfire, Pan-pan at her feet. She was stroking his whisker and humming something softly. For So-ra. She was writing in her notebook, page 312. Dinner for the shuttle crew. 5 servings. Rice, 250 grams. Crab scorpion, 3 pieces. On Minji. She stood with a notepad, studying the lieutenant's uniform, taking notes, fabric material, type of fastener, insignia system. Her scientific curiosity never waned. On Haru, she sat next to him, as always, silently, staring into the fire. She didn't speak. There was no need. At Haewon, she was bandaging a blister on the palm of one of the crew members, sarcastic, warm, professional. At Gitae, he was speaking to the crew in a military manner. Report, coordinates, timeline, facts. Clear, concise. At Jung-ho, he was sitting at the edge of the square, eating his portion, the usual, the standard one. So-ra had brought it, just like every day. He ate without looking up, but he ate. All 34 of them, every face, every name, every bowl. Do-hyun looked at the lieutenant and answered. He said he was going to stay. The lieutenant didn't understand. Do-hyun explained. Kitos 3 needs people. People need Kitos 3. You can live here. People are already living here. 34 people for 6 months. The city stands. The walls hold. There's food. There's water. There's heat. The bugs have been tamed. The queen has been fed. A map has been drawn up. The medical station is operational. The lab is operational. The kitchen is operational. He said he was requesting that Mafo 2 be registered as a 3rd category colony. The first human settlement on Kitos 3, founder and leader Kim Do-hyun, 17 years old, former night shift clerk at the Homart supermarket, Mafo district, Seoul. The lieutenant was silent for a long time. Then he took out his tablet, opened the registration form, began to fill it out. Do-hyun stood and watched. So-yeon approached, stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. She didn't say anything, she just stood there. Yuna stood on the other side. Pan-pan was on her shoulder, rustling.
Sora stood behind him, a notebook pressed to her chest. Minji stood next to Sora, a notepad in her hand. Haru stood next to Do-hyun, silent as always, right by his side. Hae-won stood a little further away. She lit a hand-rolled cigarette. She exhaled the smoke into the green sky. She whispered a single word. City. Do-hyun stood in the center, wearing an apron with a stain on it, a ladle in his hand. Surrounding him stood his city, his people, his world. Behind him, the refrigerator hummed quietly. The compressor was running, steady, calm. Like at 3 a.m. in an empty home-art, when the whole world is asleep and you're at your post and everything's fine, and the cold is holding steady and the goods are on the shelves, and the door is open to anyone who walks in. Grandma and Sol will receive a letter in 2 weeks, standard Federation delivery. The letter will contain a single line. Grandma, I opened a supermarket here.